Chapter 236. The entire sky was enveloped by a piercing, seven-colored light. That seven-colored light was like a rainbow, but it did not have the gentleness of a rainbow. Instead, it was an incredibly flamboyant color that filled every single corner of the world Su Ming could see. The seemingly blinding seven-colored light fell on all the mountains, fused into the sky, fell on the ground, and filled countless people's eyes. The appearance of the light brought with it an indescribably domineering air, causing the countless freezing sky clan disciples in the other 8 summits besides the 9th summit in the great frozen plains of freezing sky clan to lift their heads towards the center of the seven-colored light. Uproars echoed in all directions, because in freezing sky clan, this seven-colored light could only mean one person. Because in freezing sky clan, there could only be one person who could appear in such a flamboyant manner. That person was the prodigy of freezing sky clan, the one who was known to have the highest chance of becoming the 4th god of berserkers. Sima Xian. It's senior brother Sima. He's back. I heard that senior brother Sima has been away for many years. When he left, he was already at the peak of the transcendence realm. Now that he's back, could it be that he's already reached the bone sacrifice realm? When senior brother Sima left the clan to train, he said that he wouldn't return until he reached the bone sacrifice realm. The uproars shook the sky and earth. The appearance of the seven-colored light shocked all the disciples in the 8 summits of the freezing sky clan. Some of the people who were familiar with Sima Xian even turned into long arcs and flew out from the mountains. In the blink of an eye, an innumerable amount of people arrived in the sky and floated in the air as they looked into the distance. Right beside Su Ming was the group of palaces at the center of the 9 summits under Heaven Gate. The people who had been going in and out just now also flew out with fervent and respectful gazes. As they looked towards the sky, they wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed towards the sky. In fact, even the woman who Z called a woman disguised as a man by Su Ming's side also walked out quickly and bowed towards the sky. Welcome back to the clan, eldest brother Sima. These voices echoed on the ground and were spoken by an innumerable amount of people. They seemed to have fused together and turned into one voice, turning into a wave of sound that shook the sky and earth. Su Ming stood there with a sharp stab of pain in his eyes. The seven-colored light in the sky looked as if it was about to pierce through them. He looked at the countless people around him, welcoming him respectfully. At that moment, Z, and even Che, who was by his side, looked as if they had been ignored by the world. In everyone's eyes, there was only that seven-colored light left. Su Ming was not unfamiliar with this feeling. This scene made him remember the time he was in Dark Mountain all those years ago. When he stepped onto the field before Windstream Mountain, he had also stood in a corner and watched as the prodigies walked towards him without a sound. He was the center of attention. However, the current Su Ming was far from the him of the past. In the past, he had needed to force himself to remain calm, but at that moment, he did not need to do it on purpose. He just stood there, and he was calm. His eyes were calm, his expression was calm, his body was calm, and his mind was calm. He looked at the sky in the distance, and the source of the seven-colored light. There was a tall mountain floating in midair, and that was the seven-colored mountain. On the mountain peak, one could vaguely see a man standing there. The color of the man's clothes was indistinguishable from the 7 colors. One could only see that his long hair was fluttering in the wind. One could only see that there was a woman standing beside him. However, one could not see the woman's appearance clearly. As the seven-colored mountain closed in, more shouts of greeting reverberated on the ground. The shouts of greeting rose and fell like waves in Su Ming's ears. He saw the people from the various summits floating in the sky, wrapping their fists in their palms and bowing towards the incoming seven-colored mountain. Thank you for welcoming me, my fellow sect members. I've prepared some meager gifts for my return to the clan. Once I return to the mountain, I'll ask someone to send them to all my friends. Sima Xian's gentle voice echoed in the air. With a gentle smile on his face, he wrapped his fist in his palm towards the crowd. There was a relaxed look on his face, and there was an indescribable charm to him. It made all those who saw him feel as if they were bathing in the spring breeze, and they would naturally feel a sense of familiarity towards him. Hypocrite. I've seen this Sima Xin a few times in the past. His smile is too fake. Second senior brother smile is much more comfortable than his. Master once wanted to take him in as his disciple, but thank goodness he didn't accept him in the end. Huzi stood beside Su Ming and scrunched his nose as he spoke in disdain. Ziche fell silent, but as he looked at the seven-colored mountain in the distance, a dark look appeared in his eyes. He already held a grudge against Sima Xin. If Sima Xin had not asked him to cause trouble for Su Ming in the Ninth Summit, he would not have ended up in this state. Su Ming remained silent. He continued looking at the seven-color mountain that was getting closer to him in the sky. Gradually, he saw Sima Xion's face clearly. He was dressed in white and had an incredibly handsome face. He looked gentle and elegant, as if there was not a hint of anger within him. His eyebrows were as sharp as swords, and the smile on his lips never disappeared. A temperament that was clearly different from other people naturally appeared on Sima Xion's body, and when it fused with his extraordinary looks, it turned into an indescribable charm. This was not the first time Su Ming and Sima Xion came into contact, but more accurately speaking, this was the first time he truly saw Sima Xion. This was different from when Sima Xion had used Feng Mu's body to attack in Han Mountain City. Su Ming looked at Sima Xion, at his elegant demeanor, at his gentle smile, and he remained calm and did not speak. Hu Zi's disdain, Su Ming's calmness, and Ziche's sullenness. When the three of them stood together, they were completely different from the respectful expressions of the other Freezing Sky Clan disciples around them. Because of that, when people swept their gazes past them, they would inevitably notice them. Sima Xion might have also noticed Su Ming, but he still maintained the smile on his face. There was no other change in his expression. Let's go, third senior brother. Once we get the paper, we'll go back to the mountain, Su Ming said calmly. The grudge between him and Sima Xion could be described as simple, but it could also be described as complicated. However, in the end, there was only one thing that could not be resolved. Unless he could return Han Mountain Bell respectfully and ignore his promise with Han Songzi, or even obtain Sima Xion's forgiveness for what happened to Feng Mu, there was no other way for him to resolve the matter. And this was something Su Ming could not do. As he spoke, Su Ming was just about to turn around and walk towards the artifact storage hall behind him to retrieve the paper. But the instant he was about to turn around, due to the seven-colored mountain closing in on him and the seven-colored light slowly disappearing, Su Ming not only managed to see Sima Xion's face clearly from the corner of his eyes, he also saw a pretty face with a sweet smile and a hint of excitement on it behind him. It was a beautiful girl dressed in a purple robe. She did not look old, and her skin was like jade. Her eyes were like the moon. She stood behind Sima Xion with an obedient look on her face, but the lively look in her eyes would make all those who saw her feel stunned. At the same time, they would also be able to sense a hint of wild beauty within the girl's presence. That sort of beauty was something that came naturally to her. It was not something that was acquired, and neither was it something that was intentionally created. It was a rare, wild beauty that appeared due to the environment she grew up in, her personality, and other factors. Her sparkling eyes, curved eyebrows, and the intoxicating curve at the corners of her lips formed a beautiful smile in the truest sense of the word. She might still be slightly inexperienced and immature, but it was this girl that made Su Ming, who was originally about to turn around, shudder violently the instant he saw her through the corner of his eyes. He instantly felt as if there were 100,000 thunderbolts roaring in his head and exploding at the same time, causing his body to tremble. His breathing also quickened in a manner that he had never experienced before. It was as if at that moment, his breathing could no longer keep up with the booming sounds in his head, could no longer keep up with the pounding of his heart. Right before Su Ming's eyes, the world froze. The wind did not move, the clouds did not move. All the uproars by his ears disappeared in an instant. At that instant, there was no longer anyone else in the world before his eyes. The 9 mountains were no longer there. The 7 colors in the sky had completely disappeared from his eyes. The 7-colored mountain was no longer there, and neither was Sima Exine. In his eyes, in his world, at this moment, the only thing that appeared was that purple figure, that figure with a wild smile, that figure with a pair of flickering eyes that seemed to contain boundless intelligence. That person, a girl with wild beauty. The calmness in Su Ming's eyes crumbled. The calmness on his face shattered. The calmness in his body trembled. The calmness in his heart was no longer there. At that moment, he forgot that he was standing in freezing Sky Clan. He forgot that he was looking at the girl standing behind Sima Exine. He forgot everything. His mind was blank at that moment. There were no thoughts in his head, no thoughts in his mind. There was only a sad song played by a sun that surrounded his heart soundlessly. Along with that song was a picture that made his heart ache. Snow was falling down from the sky in that picture. A man and a woman were holding hands as they walked in the snow. Snow fell on their hair, and it looked as if they were walking together until their hair turned white. Su Ming, this is a promise. I'll definitely go. The things in that picture made Su Ming tremble. He stared at the woman who was gradually getting closer to him in the sky with a dumbfounded expression. He stared at everything before him. Bai Ling, how? How could this be? Su Ming mumbled. Disbelief appeared in his eyes. At that moment, a strong urge suddenly erupted from his body. He did not want to suppress that urge. Neither would he suppress it. Much less could he suppress it. Even if that urge would cause him to stop his training while he cleared his mind, he still did not want to suppress it. He lifted his right foot slowly at that moment, and the moment his foot landed on the sky, he stepped into the air and walked towards the 7-color mountain. Su Ming's action stunned Hu Zi, who was by his side. He might be surprised, but he immediately followed. Zi Che hesitated for a moment before he too followed behind. The 7-colored light in the sky grew weaker, and at that moment, Su Ming stood before the floating 7-colored mountain. He had blocked the mountain's path. This scene was immediately noticed by all the people in the area, and they all turned their gazes towards that direction. The thousands of people's eyes instantly focused on Su Ming, this face that was incredibly unfamiliar to them. What is your name? There was no 7-colored mountain in Su Ming's eyes. Neither was there Sima Exine, nor was there anyone else. There was only the woman's figure, or more accurately speaking, he was looking at the person standing in the snow at the foot of Dark Mountain. Please get recommendation votes. Please get monthly votes. Ever since Devil's Quest was published, it received a lot of support from new and old readers, causing Air Jin's anxious heart to calm down. He sincerely thanked everyone for their passionate support. All the readers who love Devil's Quest and support Air Jin have worked hard. You are Air Jin's method to clear your minds, allowing me to create pictures in a bold and unconstrained manner. Thank you. I would like to especially thank the 70-something Alliance Masters for their great support. Fning, Language of Dreams, Say Regret We Didn't Meet Sooner, Cucumbers Muster, Forgotten Tears, Flying Dogs, Full Moon Pavilion, Moon Fiend, Silly Pepper, Speechless, The Prodigal is Dead, Please Burn Joss Paper for those who want to find the Prodigal Pin fan, Yi Luo Goo's Rain, Carefree Yi Tribe Elves, Bayon's Father, Woo Woo the Greatest, A Gust of Wind, Foolish Pepper, Beyond the Three Realms, I Am Genius Shao, Prosperous Border Central Army Tent, Sweeping Heaven's Halberd, I King Snake, Book and I, Rainy Night Talk, Hopeless, ZZZ903, Wei Luo Su Shui, Nothing, Tyrannical, YH_CC_ Heart Rhythm Inc., Yellow Crane Yao Yao, Snow Brushing Flowers, I Just Want to Change My Name, Sea Wings Mirror, Dragon Celestial Coil, Light Ink Bamboo, Long Sleeves Fragrance, Devil to Watermelon, Bloody Evil Time of Sunshine, Moon Setting Star Shadow, God's Shocking Master, Melancholic God, Wandering Around If You Have Nothing to Do, Supreme Evil God, If You Like It, Kelvinator, Swan Swan Under the Moon, Long Yushuan Little Adam 888, Embellishment of Memories, A Lifetime Struggle, Liberation, Yin Xiangyu, Young Master Hao Yu, Zheng Yu, W867, 4792, Eagle Warrior, Loneliness, Study Boy A Little Talent, Holy Sleep, Deep Blue Left Hand, Elder Nameless, God's Promise Forever, Pighead Dagger, Lonely Love, Devil Seeker Su Ming, Lucifer of the Morning Light, Fourth Step Realm. White Crane in the Sky, I can only repay everyone with an even better picture creation. I will give all the Alliance Masters the protection of the souls of the wings of the moon. I hope that all of you will be able to step on the wings of the moon, just like how you transcended, and that your lives, work, and studies will change with each passing day. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 237. Sima Xian's return caught a lot of people's attention. Among them were two people Su Ming did not notice. One of them was Han Fei Zi from the fourth summit. She wore a white robe and stood on the mountain. She looked as cold as ice with a calm expression as she looked at the seven-colored mountain in the sky. No one knew what she was thinking. However, there was a chilling glint in her eyes, revealing a hint of hostility towards Sima Xian. That hostility was perhaps different from Han Songzi's. It was a form of judgment toward the competitor. The other person Su Ming did not pay attention to was Han Songzi from the third summit. She stood on the third summit, and the person accompanying her was still the beautiful woman with the oval face. They saw Sima Xian, heard the crowd's cheers, and also saw the light from the seven-colored mountain shining on their bodies. The moment she saw Sima Xian, Han Songzi's face turned pale. The woman beside her frowned, let out a cold harumph, and took a few steps closer to Han Songzi. He's not first on the Great Frozen Plains ranking board. He's only second, and he's already so arrogant. Han Songzi fell silent. She lowered her head and did not speak. The person who has the highest chance of becoming the fourth god of berserkers is just a creation of the school. The school has created a lot of opportunities for him. In fact, in many disciples' hearts, Sima Xian, eldest senior sister Tian Lanming, and senior brother Qingqing have already been transformed into gods of berserkers, to be known as the three great prodigies of Freezing Sky Clan. Let's see who among the three of them can be the first to enter Heaven Gate. But Sima Xian might have great potential, but I dislike some of his methods. Even eldest senior sister Tian Lanming and Qingqing can't cause such a commotion every time they return to the school. Besides the school creating him and creating a lot of people to go crazy over him, it's also because of some of his methods. He used a large amount of items as support to attract people to follow him and befriend him. The woman beside Han Songzi spoke with a cold sneer. She cast a glance at Han Songzi, and pity appeared on her face. Why you look like this every time you see him? What's there to be afraid of? It's just his berserker love. If you're the first to be afraid and only hope for others to help you, then even if someone successfully helps you escape, your heart will still be occupied by another person. Are we women any worse than men? Look at our eldest senior sister, Tian Lanming. She's the best example. Even if this Sima Xian saw our eldest senior sister, would he dare to have any thoughts about her? The woman with the oval-shaped face had an indescribable arrogance on her face. On the way back, I should have seen Sky Mist Barrier, where Uncle Master Bai is. Han Songzi bit her lip and slowly raised her head. There seemed to be determination on her face. Martial Uncle Bai? Are you talking about Uncle Master Bai, who is rumored to have gathered the great hopes of the sect in the past? He trained with the god of berserkers as his creation, but in the end he almost split from the sect, all because he did not follow the sect's wishes to train in the god of berserkers transformation, and instead inherited his master's right to become a divine general of bone sacrifice. Han Songzi nodded. Divine generals are revered. Is the dream of many people. Even for the sect, their desire for divine generals is second only to the god of berserkers, but once they become divine generals, it is almost impossible for them to become the god of berserkers. Divine generals can only be the subordinates of the future god of berserkers. There aren't many divine generals in the sect. Most of them have been sent out to experience slaughter and bloodshed to refine their own abilities for the future god of berserkers. The woman with the oval-shaped face sighed softly when she heard this. I heard that the person in your heart is also a divine general? She suddenly asked. A red flush immediately appeared on Han Songzi's face. It was as if at that moment she had forgotten about the pressure Sima Xin brought to her. Instead, she was like a little girl annoyed. Just as she was about to speak, her senior sister's expression suddenly changed. That person in your heart. What? What does he want to do? Han Song-zi was stunned. The moment she turned her head to look, her expression also changed drastically. At this moment, the surroundings immediately became silent. Everyone, including Han Song-zi, focused their gazes on the figure that was slowly walking in front of the Rainbow Mountain in midair. At that moment, even Han Fei-zi's aloof face changed. When she looked at Su Ming, there was a puzzled look on her face. Hu Zi was also stunned. He rubbed his eyes, then looked at the empty space beside him. He stared blankly at Su Ming walking towards the seven-colored mountain. At that moment, he did not hesitate. With one move, he charged towards Su Ming. He did not care about Sima Xin, neither did he care about the attention he was receiving. The only thing he cared about was that he was the one who brought his youngest junior brother out. He could not let any harm befall him. Ziche's heart pounded furiously. He felt his mouth go dry. He did not expect that Su Ming would walk out like this and face Sima Xin head-on, just like that. What is your name? Su Ming's body floated in midair. As he faced the seven-colored mountain charging towards him, he only had eyes for the woman filled with wild beauty. His voice was gentle and it echoed in the air, falling into the ears of all the people around him. All those who heard it immediately had strange expressions appear on their faces. Who is he? I don't know him, but he's followed by the ninth summit Sunda Hu. If he can travel with Sunda Hu and suddenly block senior brother Sima's path, then he must be an idiot. I heard that the ninth summit took in a new disciple. Could be him, but the ninth summit is full of weirdos. His words fit the characteristics of the ninth summit. Interesting. This person must have been attracted by junior sister Bai's beauty. In his infatuation, he forgot his identity and started asking questions just like that. He overestimates himself. Junior sister Bai is not someone he can be so rude to. As the people around them had strange expressions on their faces, mocking and disdainful whispers gradually appeared. To them, Su Ming was a person who had overestimated himself. He was being so rude to a beautiful woman, and he did it right in front of their senior brother Sima. This was truly an idiot's actions. Han Song-zi was momentarily stunned. She immediately shifted her gaze away from Su Ming and looked towards the woman behind Sima Xin. Gradually, a complicated look appeared in her eyes. He once said that he missed a promise. Han Song-zi sighed softly. The woman beside her frowned, and displeasure appeared in her eyes as she looked at Su Ming. At the same time, Han Fei-zi also cast a profound look at the woman behind Sima Xin from the fourth summit with a pensive look. The seven-colored mountain slowly came to a stop 30 feet away from Su Ming. Sima Xin stood on the mountain and looked down at Su Ming, who had blocked his path. In truth, the moment he arrived from the distance, he had already seen Su Ming, but he did not act recklessly, because Ziche was by Su Ming's side, and by the looks of it, there was a sullen and resigned look on his face. However, he did not expect that Su Ming would block his path, even though he had ignored him. It would have been fine if he was just blocking his path, but Su Ming was not even looking at him. He was instead looking at the woman behind him. This sort of disregard and the conflict between the two of them that could not be resolved made Sima Xion's gaze turn cold. Junior brother, you're an unfamiliar face. Why did you block my path? Sima Xion smiled faintly and the coldness in his eyes disappeared. His voice was calm, as if he was not angry at Su Ming's actions. His presence was extraordinary. Su Ming did not speak. Right up till the end, he did not look at Sima Xion. He kept staring at the woman filled with wild beauty. A red flush appeared on the woman's face when she was stared at by Su Ming, but she frowned and displeasure appeared in her eyes. Once she cast a glance at Su Ming, she looked at Sima Xion standing before her. She did not speak. The person before him was less than 30 feet away from him, but in Su Ming's heart, the distance between them was like heaven and earth. At that moment, Su Ming smiled. That smile was faint, but there was a hint of sadness within it. If we continue walking in the snow, will we walk until our hair turns white? This sentence echoed in his head before it eventually turned into a sigh. Su Ming knew that the woman before him was not Bai Ling. This had nothing to do with the berserker way of love. The woman's eyes were different from Bai Ling's. Even if it was difficult to tell them apart based on their appearances, their souls were different, and they were different as well. What was even more different was their presence. It was a presence that Su Ming had noticed after he spread out the branding art with his divine sense after he obtained the Qi refinement art. It was a presence that was different for each person. This person was not Bai Ling. She might look the same, but she was not Bai Ling. Su Ming closed his eyes. He did not ask any further questions. He had already obtained his answer. The urge within him gradually calmed down, and when he opened his eyes once again, there was only calmness within them. He did not look at the woman again. He turned around and was about to leave, one step at a time. His ears were filled with the low whispers of discussion around him. There were mocking and disdainful gazes falling on him, but he did not care about all of this. However, even if he did not care, it did not mean that Hu Zi did not care. Hu Zi glared at Su Ming and glared at the people around him before he started roaring with a hostile expression. What are you looking at? What? How dare you say that to Sima Niao's face? Laugh. Damn it, I'll let you laugh. Just you wait. I'll go to your house tonight and let you know just how powerful I am. As Hu Zi spoke, he looked as if he wanted to continue speaking, but he was rudely cut off by Sima Xian. Junior brother, are you going to leave just like that? Take care of this fellow disciple of yours first, or else I'll teach him the meaning of respect on your master's behalf. Sima Xian smiled, as if he was very satisfied with what the woman behind him did. At that moment, he looked at Su Ming and spoke languidly. Su Ming's footsteps faltered, and he turned around. For the first time in midair, he looked at Sima Xian. Their gazes met, and an intense clash seemed to have occurred. I'm not your junior brother, nephew disciple Sima. I'm your uncle master. If you like this work, please come to Qidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 238. Su Ming's voice was calm as he looked at Sima Xian and spoke languidly. There was no arrogance in his voice, and neither was he as condescending as when Sima Xian stood on the seven-colored mountain. However, the meaning behind his words was that he was condescending under the rules of Freezing Sky Clan. I'm your uncle master. That one sentence instantly made the people around fall silent. Their faces might be filled with indignation, but they could not refute him. They could only helplessly accept this high-ranking existence from the ninth summit. A fierce, freezing glare instantly appeared in Sima Xian's eyes. He looked at Su Ming, and a cold sneer gradually appeared on his lips. Hu Zi immediately perked up and placed his hands on his hips, then lifted his head and shouted at Sima Xian proudly. That's right. Damn it. I'm your uncle master. Come here, Sima Niao. Come and greet your uncle master. Sima Xian completely ignored Hu Zi's existence. In his eyes, there was only Su Ming at that moment. At such a close distance, and with the hint of connection he had with Han Mountain Bell in the past, he could clearly sense that Han Mountain Bell was in Su Ming's body. Uncle Master, huh? Then I'd like to see whether you have the right to become my Uncle Master. As Sima Xian spoke, he took a step forward with his right foot and lifted his left hand to point at the sky. Frost. As Sima Xian spoke, a large amount of green, freezing air suddenly appeared in the already cold sky. That freezing air seemed to have gained physical form, and wherever it went, even the air would freeze. Cracking sounds echoed in the air. Under that freezing air, a gigantic, illusory hand formed by green mist appeared in the sky. That hand was exuding a freezing air, and it gathered out of thin air. It charged towards Su Ming and seized him. Ancient creation art. As expected of senior brother Sima, he's going to become the god of berserkers. He's using ancient creation art when he attacks. This sort of casual attack is an ancient creation art. It might just be one ancient creation, but it's definitely not something an ordinary person can do. Besides Leader Lu, the others in the Ninth Summit are all trash. I heard that their eldest senior brother is always in isolation, the second is like a frail woman taking care of her plants, and the third is an idiot. As for this new guy who just entered the ninth summit, how dare he stop senior brother Sima from going up the mountain? The green hand charged towards Su Ming. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, but at that moment, anger appeared on Hu Zi's face, and he let out a low growl. Little junior brother, back off. Damn it. How dare you attack my little junior brother right in front of me? Hu Zi suddenly raised his head and sat cross-legged in midair. He suddenly raised his right hand, put his index finger and middle finger together, and drew an arc in the process. A powerful aura suddenly burst out from Hu Zi's body. The aura was so powerful that it seemed to cause the heavens and earth to change, causing the approaching green hand to freeze in midair. Enter, dream. Hu Zi's expression was extremely solemn. At that moment, not a single trace of recklessness could be seen on his face. The arc he drew with 2 fingers on his right hand seemed to contain some sort of strange creation. Even Sima Xian's expression became solemn when he saw this. The people around them also became nervous. All of them looked at Hu Zi with surprise on their faces. It was as if the Sun De, who before them had become completely different from the person in their memories at that moment. Almost at the instant that the green hand paused in midair, Hu Zi's right hand had already touched the center of his eyebrows with 2 fingers. His eyelids immediately relaxed and actually closed, and snoring sounds could be heard. There were no changes in the area. Only Hu Zi's snoring echoed in the air. However, his body was in deep sleep and could not continue floating in the air. So he fell down. All the people who were watching were momentarily stunned before they burst out laughing. Even Sima Xian was stunned for a moment before he started laughing, but a chilling glint appeared in his eyes. He lifted his right hand and pointed at the falling Hu Zi. Immediately, the green hand made of freezing air charged towards Hu Zi. It was clear that Hu Zi's actions just now had made Sima Xian speechless, but he was also displeased and wanted to injure him severely. Su Ming was silent. He did not laugh. It was clear from Hu Zi's actions just now that he had truly treated him as his youngest junior brother. As his senior brother, he had to stand before him. His level of cultivation might not be high, but it was precisely because his level of cultivation was not high that he could show his emotions when he stood up. That alone was enough. Almost the moment Hu Zi's body fell, Su Ming turned into a long arc and charged towards Hu Zi. He grabbed his body in midair and landed on the ground. Yet the green hand was charging towards them from behind them. Su Ming was not bothered by that hand. The moment he landed on the ground, Ziche flew up and charged towards the hand. He had to attack, or else he did not know what sort of terrifying consequences he would face once he returned to the ninth summit. Besides, he was also angry towards Sima Xian. Booming sounds reverberated in the sky above Su Ming. He did not lift his head. He landed on the ground and placed Hu Zi, who was still snoring and drooling at the corner of his mouth, down gently. He looked at Hu Zi's expression. At that moment, Hu Zi's naive look made a smile appear on Su Ming's face. Sima Xian's low voice came from the sky amidst the booming sounds. Ziche, what's the meaning of this? Sima Xian, there's no point in talking. If you make things difficult for Su Ming, then I'll have to attack. Ziche's appearance immediately caused the onlookers to burst into an uproar once again. Isn't senior brother Ziche, who's ranked 9th on the Great Frozen Plains ranking board, good friends with senior brother Sima? Why is he suddenly helping an outsider? I saw him with the people from the 9th summit just now. As the discussions continued, the girl with the oval face beside Han Song, Zi, let out a harumph. But it was clear that once she saw Ziche, she let out a sigh of relief in her heart. Sima Xian stared at Ziche. Their gazes met in midair, and gradually their gazes turned cold. At that moment, Su Ming was looking at Hu Zi sleeping and snoring on the ground. He lifted his head slowly and looked at Sima Xian, who was standing beside the 7-colored mountain in the sky. Ziche, go back. Take care of my 3rd senior brother, Su Ming said languidly. Su Ming said languidly. He lifted his right foot and took a step towards the air. At the instant his foot landed, his body shot up from the ground, and he stood in midair. Ziche hesitated for a moment before he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards Su Ming, then returned to Hu Zi's side. My level of cultivation isn't as high as yours. I originally didn't want to fight against you right now. Su Ming looked at Sima Xin and spoke calmly. You have your own matters, and I have mine as well. But you shouldn't have attacked my third senior brother so heavily after he lost his ability to fight back. Su Ming's voice was still calm. He's my third senior brother. Now, if you want to fight, then let's fight. A freezing glare instantly appeared in Su Ming's calm eyes. At the same time, an incredibly thick wave of murderous aura appeared on Su Ming's body. That murderous aura came from his right eye, from the blood moon in the picture of Dark Mountain. The moment he said the word fight, Su Ming's entire demeanor changed. He was still as calm as ever, but within that calmness was a weight that made people feel pressured. He lifted his right foot and took his first step towards Sima Xin. The moment his foot landed, a clear mountain mark immediately appeared on Su Ming's face. The mountain mark and the 5 summits were naturally Dark Mountain. The moment the mark appeared, an illusion immediately appeared in the sky above Sima Xin. In the blink of an eye, the mark of Dark Mountain on Su Ming's face appeared in the sky. It was a gigantic Dark Mountain. The moment Dark Mountain appeared, a powerful pressure spread out, causing the expressions of all the people watching to change, and they all retreated. Sima Xin smiled coldly. He lifted his right hand and clenched his fist in the air. The moment he did so, a large amount of freezing air immediately gathered under Dark Mountain in the sky and turned into a gigantic ice fist that charged towards Dark Mountain. A thunderous rumble echoed in the air. When the ice fist collided with the Dark Mountain, a powerful shockwave spread out. Visible ripples spread out under this shockwave. Once he hurled his fist forward, a layer of ice immediately appeared at the spot where the ice fist came into contact with the 5 summits of Dark Mountain formed by Su Ming's mountain mark. That layer of ice spread out rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, it covered the entire mountain, turning it into an ice mountain with 5 summits. The ice mountain floated in the sky. It was originally an illusion, but at that moment, due to the ice fist formed by Sima Xion's ancient creation art, the mountain was caught in a state between having physical form and being an illusion. Child's play. You're still as weak as when I met you in Han Mountain City. I don't even need to use the power of my Berserker mark, much less use my origin vessel, the 7-color Berserker's Mountain. Sima Xian spoke slowly. There was no disdain in his voice, but a disregard that made it seem as if he was not on the same level as Su Ming. As he spoke, Sima Xian placed his hands behind his back and looked at Su Ming coldly. I'll give you a chance to attack. If you disappoint me, then I'll make you despair. Bring out your Han Mountain bell. Let me see just how much power this bell can bring out in your hands, Sima Xian said coldly. Su Ming did not speak. He had long since experienced the arrogance that seeped into Sima Xian's bones. It was not the first time he heard those words coming from Sima Xian's mouth. In his silence, his expression turned even colder. A berserker mark that Sima Xian could not see appeared under his robes, and in an instant, an illusion of Dark Mountain tribe appeared in the sky. In the sky, under the frozen Dark Mountain, a large area of distortions appeared. The distortions covered a large area, and in an instant, an illusory image of Dark Mountain tribe appeared in the world. The grass, the trees, the houses were all incredibly exquisite and lifelike. They filled the air, causing all those who saw them to feel as if they were being sucked in. A grave expression appeared on Sima Xian's face. So this is your complete berserker mark. A heavy, oppressive feeling enveloped the area as Dark Mountain tribe appeared. The appearance of the berserker mark made Sima Xian feel a wave of pressure. This could be said to be the most complicated berserker mark he had ever seen in his life. There was also an indistinct sadness within the illusion of the berserker mark, and it made his heart tremble. What is this berserker mark? It has emotions in it. Sima Xian's expression changed drastically. I changed Dark Mountain to Han Mountain City. I made a typo. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 239. Sima Xian's heart trembled. Su Ming's berserker mark made him feel a strong sense of threat. That sense of threat surpassed the one he felt when he saw Su Ming in Han Mountain City. However, it was nothing more than a threat. Sima Xian's face was filled with a very serious expression, and at the same time, veins could be seen on his face. They looked like a flower which was in the middle of blooming and was the most outstanding of all. Yet if anyone took a closer look, they would see clearly that the blooming flower was an ice flower. There was an indistinct layer of frost around the ice flower, causing Sima Xian's face to look cold. You're one of the few people who can make me use my berserker mark. Today, I'll let you see my berserker mark. Sima Xian said slowly. When his voice fell into the people's ears, it turned into a layer of frost that covered their bodies. As he spoke, an endless amount of ice gathered around Sima Xian's body and turned into a gigantic ice flower. Under the sunlight, the ice flower shone with a seven-colored light, causing the area around Sima Xian to immediately be enveloped in that seven-colored light. It crashed into the dark mountain tribe formed by Su Ming's berserker mark in an illusory manner. There were no rumbling sounds, only cracking sounds. The moment Sima Xian's berserker mark appeared, his presence rose as well. Soon, as the cracking sounds continued, the dark mountain tribe formed by Su Ming's berserker mark was immediately covered by a layer of ice, just like Dark Mountain. In the blink of an eye, all the houses and plants in Dark Mountain tribe turned into ice sculptures. Even if you activated all your berserker marks, you're still very weak. As Sima Xian spoke, the gigantic ice flower behind him gradually rose into the air under the seven-colored light. The gigantic petal was the center of the seven-colored light, and it charged towards Su Ming as if it wanted to compete with the sun in the sky for its brilliance. The petal was like a gaping mouth that wanted to swallow Su Ming whole. The battle between Su Ming and Sima Xian might have seemed to have happened over a long period of time, but in truth, it happened in a short span of time. The two of them might be several hundreds of feet away from each other, but this sort of battle between berserker marks was incredibly dangerous. The slightest bit of weakness could result in a grievous injury. This battle of berserker marks was an origin divine ability that could only be used by berserkers who had reached the transcendence realm. Su Ming's expression did not change when he saw the ice flower formed by Sima Xian's berserker mark charging towards him. He stood there calmly, and his eyes were no longer looking at Sima Xian, but at the frozen dark mountain and his tribe. My berserker mark is still incomplete, Su Ming said languidly. This was the first time he spoke since his fight against Sima Xian. As he spoke, a murderous aura that surged into the sky erupted from his body, and his right eye instantly turned blood red. That blood red appearance was the blood moon. At the same time, a blood moon appeared above the illusory dark mountain and the tribe. The appearance of the blood moon brought with it a demonic aura. The moment it appeared, the sorrowful atmosphere of the entire dark mountain and the tribe changed. It was no longer sadness, but a shocking, killing intent. It covered the ice of Dark Mountain and turned it the color of blood. The ice outside the house tribe was also illuminated by a bloody glow. It was as if the entire world had turned the color of blood. The picture of the blood moon in Dark Mountain. The booming sound was like thunder that spread in all directions. The layer of ice outside of Wushan shattered and exploded. The ice outside of the houses of the tribe also cracked and turned into shards that rolled out. Even the gigantic ice flower charging towards Su Ming in midair turned into a blood flower under the illumination of the blood moon. Before it could even get close to Su Ming, it immediately shattered and exploded. This is now my complete berserker mark. Su Ming took a step forward, lifted his right hand, and pushed forward. The moment he did so, Dark Mountain rumbled and charged towards Sima Xian. Murmurs seemed to come from the houses in the tribe, causing Sima Xian's expression to change, and he immediately retreated. Yet before he could retreat too far, he saw that Sima Xian could not escape from the area where the light from the blood moon shone. The entire picture of the blood moon and Dark Mountain looked as if it had come to life and turned into a huge sealing rune. Sima Xian was trapped within the rune, and it was as if he could not escape. Not only did his expression change drastically, his pupils shrank and shock appeared on his face. Su Ming's berserker mark had once again surpassed his imagination. This was completely different from the Su Ming in his memories. He suddenly understood why Ziche had failed, because to him, Su Ming had the power to fight against those in the later stage of the Transcendence realm with just his berserker mark alone. He still has his origin lightning and Han Mountain Bell, and that sharp sword. As Sima Xian retreated, he bit the tip of his tongue and coughed out a mouthful of blood. That blood immediately turned into blood mist before him. Your berserker mark is complicated, but my berserker mark isn't simple either. As Sima Xian spoke, the blood mist in front of him charged towards him and dyed his face. Then, strangely enough, it quickly fused into his skin. Immediately after, Sima Xian lifted his head and let out a low roar. The ice flower berserker mark appeared on his face and body once again, but this time, it was not just one ice flower that appeared. Instead, there were 2, 3, for until 8 appeared. These 8 ice flowers covered his entire body, but they were clearly smaller compared to the first one. Yet the moment the 8 ice flowers appeared, Sima Xian immediately froze in his tracks. He no longer retreated. Instead, he lifted his arms and swung them to his sides. With that one swing, 8 ice flowers appeared out of thin air around his body. As they surrounded him, they seemed to have turned into a vortex of icy wind. Frozen berserker sky, 10 creations, Sima Xian whispered. He brought his arms together and pointed at Su Ming. Immediately, the vortex of icy wind around him grew larger, and as if it wanted to tear apart the sky and earth, it crashed into the illusion formed by Su Ming's berserker mark. Booming sounds reverberated in the air. The vortex of icy wind became smaller, but at the same time, the Dark Mountain tribe formed by Su Ming's berserker mark immediately disappeared like ashes under the icy wind vortex. It was as if a picture had been torn to shreds. When Dark Mountain tribe completely disappeared, Dark Mountain also trembled and eventually crumbled. Only the blood moon remained, and it crashed into the ice vortex, which had shrunk by more than half. The ice vortex that had shrunk turned into 8 ice flowers once again. They connected with each other and charged towards the blood moon. Under the blood-red light, booming sounds reverberated in the air. The first ice flower exploded, the second shattered, the third shattered, and the fourth shattered. However, the 5th ice flower rushed out and crashed into the blood moon. The blood moon shuddered. Under the booming sounds, it looked as if it was becoming unstable. At the same time, the 6th ice flower crashed into the blood moon once again. Soon after, the 7th and 8th ice flowers crashed into the blood moon. Booming sounds surged into the sky, and the moment the blood moon crumbled, the ice flowers also disappeared. What a powerful berserker mark! Sima Xian could no longer say that Su Ming was too weak. At that moment, his breathing was rapid. His berserker mark had already been perfected, but against Su Ming's berserker mark, he could only maintain a balance. This must be the limit of his berserker mark. This berserker mark can't change anymore. Killing intent appeared in Sima Xian's eyes. In truth, he had wanted to kill Su Ming since a long time ago, but he had been hiding it. After all, this was Freezing Sky Clan. Yet now, once he witnessed the might of Su Ming's berserker mark, he could no longer hide his killing intent. The moment their berserker marks fought against each other and disappeared, Sima Xian moved swiftly and turned into a long arc that charged toward Su Ming. He wanted to kill Su Ming. Yet the moment he charged out, Su Ming also took a step forward, and with the same shocking speed, not only did he not retreat, he instead charged towards Sima Xian. The distance between the two of them was not far to begin with. As they charged forward, they closed in almost an instant. The moment they closed in, a large amount of lightning arcs swam around Su Ming's entire body. As he hurled his fist forward, an endless amount of lightning gathered together, and as thunder rumbled, it charged towards Sima Xin. Sima Xin also lifted his right hand. As he clenched his fist, a seven-colored light instantly appeared on his palm. The instant they clashed, booming sounds spread out, and both of them let out muffled groans before they tumbled backwards. Sima Xin retreated 30 feet, and Su Ming retreated 50 feet. The moment they paused for a moment, they closed in on each other once again. This time, Sima Xin tapped a few spots on his body, and immediately a seven-colored light shone around his body. Under that seven-colored light was a layer of ice, and an ice armor appeared on his body. This was the seven-colored ice armor Sima Xin had created himself. Similarly, black mist surrounded Su Ming's body. As a divine general of transcendence, he had his own armor. As the black mist filled the area, it turned into armor. The moment it appeared, it immediately caused the already shocked crowd to let out loud cries of surprise. Divine General of Transcendence. He's a Divine General of Transcendence. No wonder he can fight against Senior Brother Sima. He's a Divine General of Transcendence, and his power is extraordinary. The complexity of his Berserker mark is terrifying. The uproar in the area had originally been suppressed by the intense battle between the Berserker marks, but once it erupted, it instantly turned into a buzzing sound. They did not know of Su Ming's status as a Divine General. In truth, this matter was greatly related to the Fourth Summit. For some unknown reason, the left preceptor of the Fourth Summit had sealed off all information related to Su Ming. Outsiders only knew that a new disciple had appeared in the Ninth Summit. His identity, his level of cultivation, and other matters were mostly a mystery. As for Chun and Su, once they returned to Freezing Sky Clan, they were ordered to keep their mouths shut. They were not to talk about anything related to Su Ming. Is he the person who made Big Brother Sima angry? The girl on the seven-color mountain was still looking at the lofty Sima Xin in her heart. As for Su Ming, she did not have a good first impression of him. Besides, he was also Sima Xion's enemy. When she remembered everything that had happened when she was playing chess with her big brother Sima, her gaze toward Su Ming became even more hostile. I changed Dark Mountain to Han Mountain City. I made a typo. If you like this work, please come a Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 240. Su Ming and Sima Xian stood in the sky. One of them was surrounded by black mist that turned into a black fog armor that gave him a ghastly air. Sima Xian's entire body was surrounded by a seven-colored light. His ice armor was filled with a piercing light that made it difficult for people to look at him directly. Two completely different kinds of auras, two completely different kinds of armors, two completely different people. You're not in the Bones Sacrifice realm. Su Ming said slowly, and the moment he did so, he charged forward. Sima Xion's face was dark. He let out a cold harumph and took a step forward. The two of them clashed once again in midair. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and the intense battle made all the people who were watching feel as if their breathing had frozen. The more Sima Xion fought, the more shocked he became. He could not imagine how Su Ming had become so strong in such a short amount of time. This was no longer the person he could force back with just a berserker seed that had gathered his soul together. With this sort of growth speed, he absolutely had the right to be highly regarded by Sima Xion. This person is growing too quickly. I can't let him live. Sima Xion took a few steps back and seized the air with his right hand. Immediately, an ice spear manifested in his hand, and he thrust it towards Su Ming. At the same time, Sima Xion swung his left hand before him, and a round bottle immediately appeared. With a flick of his finger, howls came from within the bottle, and a white wolf charged out. It grew in the wind, and in an instant, it became several dozens of feet big. Its fur was as white as snow, and it bared its fangs and let out a roar at Su Ming. Its roar turned into a wave of impact that crashed into Su Ming's body. It made his mind go blank, as if he had been shaken, but it only lasted for an instant before the power of the aura refinement realm in his body started circulating on its own, and he immediately regained his senses. He regained his senses too quickly, causing Sima Xin to frown. With the long spear in hand, as he fought against Su Ming, the ice wolf also pounced on him. He foamed. Su Ming took a few steps back. Black mist immediately spread out from his chest and turned into foam. There was a bitter look on He Feng's face, but he did not dare not attack. Once he appeared, he charged towards the ice wolf's soul. Both of them were soul bodies. As they fought against each other, even though they did not make a single sound, it was still incredibly dangerous. At that moment, the mark of the sword at the center of Su Ming's brows flashed. The small virescent sword flew out and surrounded Su Ming. It moved according to his will and clashed against Sima Xin's long spear. As he fought against Sima Xin, not only did the people around them watch, it also attracted the attention of some of the powerful berserkers from the 9 summits of the Great Frozen Plains. In fact, some of the older generation also looked over. Second senior brother crouched down on the 9th summit and fiddled with his plants. Occasionally, he would lift his head to look at the booming sounds coming from beyond the mountain and shake his head. How many times has third bro failed to enter the dream? Sigh. You want to enter the dream and fight with his life on the line. This is not good. At the top of the mountain, Tian Xiezi sat cross-legged with a proud smile on his face as he looked at the rumbling in the distance. Not bad, not bad. Beat him up. There are people on the other summits watching this battle, which was rarely seen in the Great Frozen Plains of Freezing Sky Clan. The left preceptor of the 4th summit, the old man who liked to wear red robes, stood there with a grave expression on his face. Virescent light sword. That's Hong Kong's treasure. Why is it in his hands? He frowned, but once he cast a glance at the 9th summit, he shook his head and no longer bothered himself with these trivial matters. Besides him, the old people from the other summits also revealed themselves and watched the battle. On the 7th peak, halfway up the mountain, there was a woman dressed in red. She sat cross-legged on a large rock. She had black hair that draped over her shoulders. As the wind blew, it would occasionally reveal her snow-white skin. There was a gentle look on her face as she looked at the people fighting in the distance. Most of the time, her eyes were trained on Su Ming, a divine general of transcendence with such a berserker mark. What's his name? Eldest senior sister. His name is Su Ming. He's a disciple of the 9th summit. There were a few girls standing behind the woman, and one of them quickly answered. The battle that had caught the attention of the crowd had yet to reach its most intense state. The small virescent sword by Su Ming's side crashed into the long spear. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and before they disappeared, the second sound of the collision traveled in all directions. Lightning swam around Su Ming's body and turned into a large amount of arcs that charged towards Sima Xin. There were even thunder rumbling in the sky. By the looks of it, lightning was about to descend. However, Sima Xin was a prodigy of Freezing Sky Clan. Su Ming might have seen that he had not reached the bone sacrifice realm, but he had an endless amount of divine abilities in enchanted vessels. It did not matter whether it was the shadow of the white wolf or the ice spear in his hands. Both of them were extraordinary items. There was also an endless amount of ice surrounding his body. As he fought against Su Ming's lightning, the virescent sword against the ice spear, the wind against the white wolf, caused the battle to not reach its most intense state yet. This was a battle that could not be decided within a short period of time. Su Ming's level of cultivation was the same as Sima Xin's, but his level was slightly lower. However, he was a berserker in the transcendence realm with 999 blood veins, and he had also understood the art to clear his mind. With his origin divine abilities and enchanted vessels, he could fight against all those who had yet to reach the bone sacrifice realm. The instant the small virescent sword and ice spear, lightning, and ice clashed against each other and let out booming sounds, Su Ming took a few steps back. His expression remained calm, and as he retreated, he swiped his right hand across his chest. When he lifted his hand, A round medicinal pill immediately appeared in his hand. There was a snow flower within the pill, as if it was sealed. It looked as if it was filled with an enchanting air. At the same time it let out a freezing air, there was also a dark light spreading out from it. That was Su Ming's spirit plunder. Ever since he created this pill, he had only used it once, and that was when he was treating Fong Mu's injuries. In truth, this was the first time he brought out this pill in a battle. The moment spirit plunder appeared, it immediately danced in the air. As Su Ming pointed at Sima Xen, the pill instantly turned into a long arc and charged towards him. The moment Su Ming brought out spirit plunder, Sima Xen's expression changed once again, becoming even more serious. He stared at the medicinal pill in Su Ming's hand and took a few steps back. A strange light appeared in his eyes. At the same time, he opened his mouth and spat out. A small black insect flew out of his mouth. That insect was long and looked like a stick that was about the length of a finger. If it was not because it was twisting about, it would be difficult to tell that it was an insect. The insect floated out and spread its body. Four pairs of thin wings instantly appeared on its stick-like body. Its head shone with a green light, making it look rather terrifying. The moment the insect appeared, a murderous presence immediately erupted from its body. There was also a piercing buzzing sound that seemed to charge straight into people's minds. The insect turned into a ray of green light and did not pounce on the incoming spirit plunder. Instead, it moved past it and charged towards Su Ming. That insect could be said to be Sima Xen's most valuable item besides the seven-color mountain. In fact, he had just obtained this insect not too long ago and had only managed to form a small mental connection with it after much difficulty. He had experimented with this insect many times, and it could be said that Sima Xen had never seen anything that could not be pierced through by this insect. He had tried many times, and it was the same every single time. If it was not because Su Ming had the divine general armor that made it difficult for all external divine abilities to injure him, then Sima Xen would not have used this insect. At that moment, he did not care that he would have to face the strange item that had clearly sealed his berserker seed in Fong Mu's body, flying towards him. He still wanted to kill Su Ming. At the very least, he wanted to injure him so badly that his power would fall. By doing so, once Sima Xen successfully walked out of Freezing Sky Cave and entered Heaven Gate, then no matter how fast this Su Ming trained, he would no longer be a threat to him. Spirit Plunder and the rod insect intersected with each other. The instant Spirit Plunder closed in on Sima Xen. He bit the tip of his tongue and coughed out blood. He took a step forward and turned into a blood shadow that fused with the blood he coughed out. It was as if he had turned from physical form into an illusionary fog that spread outwards, as if he could avoid the might of Spirit Plunder. Yet the moment he looked as if he was about to avoid it, Spirit Plunder came to an abrupt halt and stopped in midair. A great suction force that shocked Sima Xen erupted forth from Spirit Plunder. That suction force enveloped the blood fog around him, causing it to be clearly sucked away. The fog continued struggling, and Sima Xen's face appeared within. There was a hint of shock on his face, and with gritted teeth, the illusionary blood fog immediately split into two parts. One of them was sucked away by Spirit Plunder, and the other fell back rapidly before turning back into Sima Xen in the distance. His face was pale as he sucked in a sharp breath. What is this treasure? At the same time, Su Ming's heart also trembled. He quickly retreated, but even with his shocking speed, he could not avoid the insect charging towards him with a buzzing sound that surged into the sky. The insect closed in on him in an instant and crashed into the small Virescent sword. Once it knocked it away, it closed in once again. In fact, the insect did not even bother about the lightning swimming around Su Ming's body. It simply allowed the lightning to cover its body, and its speed did not decrease in the slightest. With a bang, it pierced through Su Ming's divine general armor. Just as it was about to rush into Su Ming's body, a loud bell chime reverberated from Su Ming's body. It was naturally Han Mountain Bell that manifested between his divine general armor and his physical body in that moment of danger, finally blocking the insect's charge. As the bell chime reverberated in the air, blood trickled down the corners of Su Ming's mouth, and he staggered several hundreds of feet backwards. "What is this insect?" Su Ming lifted his head swiftly. His words were spoken almost at the same time as Sima Xian's. At that moment, a strange feeling suddenly rose in Su Ming's heart. In fact, Sima Xian also had the same strange feeling rise in his heart. The two of them are so similar. Someone in the crowd in the distance mumbled. "I haven't been updating regularly lately because I need to take care of the elderly in my family. I hope everyone can understand. I'll try my best to maintain a fixed schedule, but if it's difficult for me to do so sometimes, please forgive me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 241. These were two completely different people, two completely different names, two completely different lives. They were like two lines that would never come into contact with each other. Even if they were heading in the same direction, they would never touch. This was Su Ming and Sima Xian before the battle in Freezing Sky Clan. Even when the two of them had just attacked, the strange similarity that even the others could see did not exist. Yet as the two of them continued attacking, it could be said that they were the last ones to notice this. As the spectators watched the battle continue, the feeling of familiarity grew stronger and stronger. One of them was lightning, and the other was ice. They looked different, but one of them had lightning swimming around his entire body, and the other had ice and snow surrounding his body. Perhaps that was not all, but soon after, when the small virescent sword and ice spear crashed into each other, and when the Divine General's black armor and crystalline ice armor appeared one after another, the feeling of similarity grew. When Sima Xian brought out the round bottle and released the wolf formed by the soul of the vessel spirit that was incredibly rare and definitely not something a normal person could obtain, Heifeng flew out from Su Ming's body, and the feeling of similarity instantly reached a certain height. The similarity reached an even greater height when Su Ming brought out spirit plunder and Sima Xian let out the strange rod insect from his mouth. The two of them had somewhat similar expressions and presences as they faced these two different enchanted vessels. At that instant, it was as if all the similarities between them had fused together and erupted forth, creating a feeling that even the others could sense that they were similar. The bell chimes echoed in the area. At that moment, the black rod insect that was only the size of a finger tumbled backwards. However, its speed of retreat was clearly much slower than before, and it even started swaying. It was as if the crash just now had caused a rebound that it could barely withstand due to its speed and the echoes from Han Mountain Bell. When Su Ming saw the rod insect tumbling backwards and looking as if it was about to recover in the span of a few breaths, his expression changed. He forced down the other emotions in his heart. He knew Han Mountain Bell's might, and the rebound from the crash was something that even he could not withstand. Yet this strange snake was showing signs of recovering so quickly. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He knew that he could not let the snake recover, or else this creature alone would be able to bring about a great impact on him. Almost the instant the small snake retreated, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed at it. At the same time, he took a huge step forward. The moment his foot landed, he immediately stood above the retreating snake. Soon after, Han Mountain Bell manifested in Su Ming's hand like a bell, and like a gigantic cover, it charged towards the small snake. In the distance, Sima Xian was forced to cut off part of the blood shadow, formed by his chi due to the power of spirit plunder. His face was pale, and even though he did not cough out blood like Su Ming, he was clearly weakened. Yet when he saw Su Ming's actions, anger immediately appeared in his eyes. He charged forward and let out a low growl. He also seized the air behind him with his right hand, and immediately, a piercing seven-colored light erupted from the seven-colored mountain that had been floating in the distance. The girl on the seven-colored mountain cried out in surprise and quickly flew back. There was a floating ribbon under her feet that supported her body. Sima Xian had finally used his strongest enchanted treasure since he started fighting against Su Ming, the seven-colored mountain. Su Ming, how dare you touch my snake treasure? Sima Xian's face was ferocious. He seized the air with his right hand, and the crimson light within the light from the seven-colored mountain abruptly shone brightly, as if it had been summoned from the seven colors. As the light shone, the seven-colored mountain looked as if it only had one color. God of Berserker's transformation, seven-colored refinement, crimson style. Veins popped up on Sima Xian's face, and his body turned crimson in an instant. His right hand, which was now bent into 5 claws, looked incredibly enchanting, and he seized the air towards the seven-colored mountain that was floating towards him. The moment he seized it, the red light from the seven-colored mountain immediately started flickering as if it was boiling. As it flashed, the mountain let out a buzzing sound, and a large amount of red light looked as if it was sucked away by Sima Xian's right hand. A large amount of red light gathered in his right hand and turned into a crimson long sword. That sword was 7 feet long and looked as if it was dyed in blood. There was also a shocking grief within it. As Sima Xian held it in his hand, he swung it down swiftly towards Su Ming. With that one slash, the world around them seemed to have darkened. An oppressive feeling spread out abruptly, and the people around them even felt as if they were suffocating. It was as if that one slash had sucked away all the breathable air in the area. A grief that could affect all emotions spread out in all directions along with that one slash. Before I was born, there was nothing. A word filled with grief tumbled out of Sima Xian's mouth as he swung his sword. His expression seemed to have fused with the sword, and with one slash he swung his sword. The instant that slash fell, Han Songzi's face immediately turned pale on the third summit. The woman with the oval-shaped face beside her also sucked in a deep breath. He cast the God of Berserker's transformation. When the red-robed left preceptor on the fourth summit saw this, he narrowed his eyes. Looks like he has already understood the first style of the God of Berserker's transformation. All the people who understood the meaning behind that slash looked over. On the 9th summit, a gourd had appeared in Tian Xiezi's hand at some point in time. He brought it to his mouth and took a sip. He shook his head and disdain appeared in his eyes. God of Berserker's transformation. You think you can use the word transformation? One of these days, I'll let the world see what the true God of Berserker's transformation is. But when Sima Xian cast this divine ability, there are some changes that belong to him. Tian Xiezi did not seem to care about how Su Ming would deal with that breathtaking slash. Instead, he drank his wine and spoke words that no one else could hear besides himself. It was as if he was confident that Su Ming could withstand that slash. Similarly, on the 9th summit, second senior brother, who had his back bent and was planting a few more plants on the frozen ground, lifted his head and cast a glance at the world in the distance. Youngest junior brother, this is a rare chance. God of Berserker's transformation, the strongest skill created by Freezing Sky Clan. When people want to draw, they first copy it before they can create their own, second senior brother mumbled to himself as he looked into the distance. The battle between Su Ming and Sima Xian at the center of the Great Frozen Plains 9 summits under Heaven Gate had already attracted a lot of attention from the people around them, especially when Sima Xian activated the God of Berserker's transformation and brought out a red glare from the seven-color mountain to turn it into a long sword that looked as if it was dyed in blood. The presence it stirred up caused the battle to instantly reach its climax. The red glare from the sword brought with it a strange sound as it charged forward, as if there were countless people crying. Those voices gathered together and turned into the sound the crimson sword made as it sliced through the sky. Su Ming's expression was calm, but there was a solemn look on his face. He had long since known of Sima Xian's strength. He might be different from how he was in the past, but there was still some distance between him and Sima Xian. Sima Xian's sword slash alone was enough to make Su Ming feel as if he could not hope to fight against it. Sima Xian's mumbles echoed in his ears as he fused with the sword. That slash seemed to contain a change in the world, a change that far surpassed Su Ming's understanding. It was precisely this change that was akin to turning something rotten into something magical, turning this normal slash into something that Su Ming could not fight against. The sword itself was also a treasure that was formed from Sima Xian's 7-colored mount. It itself contained a great amount of power, and when it fused with the god of Berserker's transformation, Su Ming's analysis told him that the sword could kill all berserkers below the bone sacrifice realm. Even a powerful berserker in the bone sacrifice realm would find it difficult to fight against that slash. However, Su Ming was not in the bone sacrifice realm, so he could only analyze it, but not be certain. The instant the slash closed in, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He knew that perhaps only Han Mountain Bell could fight against that slash. But if he used Han Mountain Bell to fight against it, then he would not be able to protect the rod insect that was about to recover. If he allowed the rod insect to recover its speed and regain its clarity of mind, then Su Ming would be forced into a passive position in this battle. However, if he did not let the rod insect go, then Su Ming's pupils shrank in the face of Sima Xian slash. He sighed and was just about to give up on the strange rod insect when a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He looked at the slash coming down from the sky. The speed of that slash had strangely slowed down. That slowing down was incredibly sudden, and what was even stranger was that the people around him did not seem to have noticed it. When Su Ming instinctively looked around him, he discovered that all the movements in the world around him had slowed down at the same time. It was as if a wave of power had arrived without a sound and was controlling the flow of time in this place. This is something I created. It's a form of serendipity that will appear once a person reaches a certain level, due to the difference in their training. It's similar to void space, but there's also a difference. To others, it might seem like something that would happen in an instant, but in your current state, it can become much slower. You have enough time to remember this slash and understand the changes in this slash. Find it, then receive Sima's slash in a fair and square manner. There was a slightly strange look on Su Ming's face. He looked at the people around him whose movements had been slowed down several times. He looked at the crimson sword that was shining with a red light in midair and was also slashing down slowly. He did not know how Tian Xiezi did it, but if he did it under the watchful eyes of many people in Freezing Sky Clan, then it would require a lot of courage. Su Ming's heart warmed even more due to his master's kindness, and the feeling that the ninth summit was his home grew even stronger. He knew that this was not the time for him to be sentimental. As he looked at the crimson sword slowly slashing down from the sky, Su Ming's eyes gradually became empty. He lifted his right hand and used his index finger as a pen, as if he was about to draw out the trajectory of the slash. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 242. Every single time Su Ming lifted his right hand and drew with his index finger, a layer of the air before him would disappear, as if there were layers of membranes in the air. He did not know how much time had passed, but Su Ming's initial speed of drawing the sword gradually slowed down, as if he was copying the sword. As time passed by, Su Ming did not know how many strokes he had drawn and how many times he had copied that sword slash. He might not know the details, but he knew that each stroke he drew might seem the same. But in truth, they were different. If he drew 1,000 strokes, then those 1,000 strokes would be different. If he drew 10,000 strokes, then those 10,000 strokes would be different. Yet he still could not find the grief that spread out when Sima Xian swung that sword slash. It was as if he could not fuse it with that one stroke. The law contained within that sword slash made Su Ming feel that it was constantly changing, as if there was no way for him to follow it. It was difficult for him to completely understand it, so he used his right index finger as a brush and drew it out completely. He knew that it would be difficult for him to completely understand the power of the world contained within that sword slash within a short period of time. That was why he did not want to do it in one go. Instead, he copied every single stroke based on something different. Gradually, as time passed by, every single time Su Ming drew his right hand downwards, he would slowly feel the countless layers of invisible membranes between him and the incoming crimson sword disappearing. As the membranes disappeared, Su Ming's body gradually drew closer to the crimson sword. Su Ming's expression was calm, but his eyes were empty, as if he had lost his soul. Perhaps more accurately speaking, it was as if his soul had already fused into his right index finger. As he drew with each stroke, his soul had already spread out in the world to sense the strange changes contained within that sword slash as the world shook. Each stroke was like a drawing, and the invisible membranes disappeared one by one. Su Ming walked forward slowly, and with each step he took, he would draw many more strokes, causing even more of the membranes to disappear. However, he knew clearly that he could only copy the shape of that sword slash, not its soul. Even if he used his own soul to draw it, he would not be able to sense that grief, which was why it would be lifeless. Grief! Su Ming mumbled. He drew again and again with his right hand before him. He could find his own grief. He could find Dark Mountain's grief, but there seemed to be something missing in those sorrows. They could not fuse into those strokes, and those slashes. It lacks the ancient air of time. When Su Ming arrived beside the crimson sword that was slashing down from midair and was only a few feet away from his sword, Su Ming's body suddenly froze, and a hint of understanding appeared in his mind. Among all the people I've met, there's only one person who possesses this ancient feeling the most. Su Ming lowered his head. His right eye gradually turned red, and he turned into Dark Mountain's blood moon. Why do you weep? Su Ming mumbled and closed his eyes. He lifted his right index finger instinctively and drew another line before him. That line was slanted. If it was drawn on a piece of paper, perhaps it would only be a horizontal line, but that simple horizontal line contained a change in the world that would make all those who saw it feel their expressions change. At that moment, he was drawing in the air. A shattering sound that could not be heard by human ears rang out, and the final invisible membrane between Su Ming and the crimson sword was torn apart when Su Ming drew it with his finger. The instant it disappeared, Su Ming lifted his right hand once again and drew another line on the crimson sword that was now no longer separated from him by the invisible membrane. That line was only a horizontal line, but while it might have seemed like a single line, in truth, it was the most perfect line Su Ming had ever drawn after he had drawn tens of thousands of lines on the sword's trajectory. At the instant he did so, the numerous horizontal lines he had drawn previously appeared beside him. These lines that looked like they had been drawn by graffiti appeared, but no one else could see this because Su Ming was the one who had drawn them, and only he could see them. At that moment, the innumerable horizontal lines moved and gathered together before Su Ming. As if they were overlapping with each other, they overlapped with each other, eventually forming the strongest horizontal line that Su Ming could draw after copying the trajectory of the sword in the world up to this point in his epiphany. The instant he drew that horizontal line, the world rumbled, and cracking sounds seemed to echo in the air. The world before him shattered like a mirror, as if a layer of it had been scraped off. Uproars reverberated in the air, and a piercing whistle descended from the sky. Everything around him had returned to normal. Time seemed to have stopped at the moment before Su Ming gained his epiphany, and, as time returned to normal, he returned to that moment as well. It was as if everything that had happened before was just an illusion. A dazed look appeared on Su Ming's face. He had his right hand lifted at that moment and was still in the same position he had when he drew the final line in that strange world. The thing that had let out a piercing whistle before him was Sima Xian's crimson sword. That sword was tumbling backwards, and with a bang in midair, it could no longer maintain its sword form. It turned into a large amount of red light and returned to the seven-colored mountain behind Sima Xian, who was looking at himself with a shocked and incredulous look on his face. Sima Xian's breathing quickened. At that moment, all the people who were watching also looked towards Su Ming. Their gazes were filled with shock as well as astonishment. During that instant, just now, they had seen with their own eyes that the crimson sword had cut down on Su Ming. Su Ming originally did not have much of a reaction, but when the sword was less than 100 feet away from him, he suddenly lifted his head and lifted his right hand, as if he had swung it lightly at the incoming crimson sword. Yet that one swing caused the world between Su Ming and the crimson sword to distort. Many people did not even manage to see it clearly before they heard rumbling sounds reverberating in the air. The crimson sword let out a piercing whistle and was sent tumbling backwards, unable to fight back against the attack. In the end, it could no longer maintain its sword form. After all, this was Sima Xian's god of Berserker's transformation. After a short period of silence, an uproar broke out. The gazes that were looking at Su Ming were filled with shock and bewilderment. It was as if at that moment, they had gotten to know this unfamiliar face before them once again. Sima Xian's breathing quickened. He might not have been injured, but during that instant, Su Ming's casual swing had caused his crimson sword to tumble backwards and shatter. This had already shocked him to the point that he froze in place. He understood the might of his god of Berserker's transformation, and it was precisely because he understood it that his heart raced against his chest and his face was filled with disbelief. That's impossible. He's not a powerful berserker in the bone sacrifice realm. How could he possibly scatter the style I understood so easily? And the way he defended himself just now, Sima Xian could not believe what he saw. Su Ming's action of dispersing his sword was especially familiar to him. During that instant just now, there was a faint hint of grief that made his heart tremble. A brilliant light appeared in the red-robed left preceptor's eyes on the fourth summit. He took a step forward with an incredibly grave expression and looked closely at Su Ming, who was standing in the battlefield in the distance. Creation, the left preceptor mumbled. He did not avert his gaze for a long time. There were also quite a number of old men who rarely left the mountain on the other mountains in Freezing Sky Clan. At that moment, they were all watching the battle just now. The power of Su Ming's final swing was enough to make their hearts tremble. On the eighth summit, the long-haired woman who had been sitting on the raised platform lifted her right hand and tucked a lock of black hair by her ear. When she put it down, she drew a line before her with her finger. The arc she drew looked somewhat similar to the horizontal line Su Ming had drawn. It was not just the appearance that was similar, but the charm contained within was similar. In fact, when she drew that line, the air before her also distorted, as if she had easily imitated Su Ming's actions just now. However, the ancient and sorrowful feeling was missing when she drew that line with her finger. What an interesting stroke. So he's from the ninth summit. The woman smiled faintly. The dazed look on Su Ming's face disappeared as he stood in midair under Heaven Gate. Calmness returned to his face, but his heart was filled with shock. The moment his mind returned to normal, a sharp pain shot through his body, causing his face to turn pale. He coughed out a huge mouthful of blood and took a few steps back. That pain did not come from a single part of his body, but from his entire body. Every inch of his flesh, every inch of his bones, and even his veins and organs were aching. That pain came too suddenly. It was as if some of Su Ming's actions had exceeded the limits of what his body could withstand, causing his body and organs to show signs of exhaustion. As Su Ming retreated, Han Mountain Bell, which was not too far away, had already enveloped the rod insect. Once it was trapped within, Han Mountain Bell shrank and eventually returned to the size of a bell before flying towards Su Ming and landing in his hands. Buzzing sounds came from within the bell, causing it to tremble non-stop in Su Ming's hands, as if the trapped rod insect was struggling madly. After all, Su Ming did not have complete control over Han Mountain Bell. He might be able to take it away at will, but in terms of its power, he could only turn the bell's chimes into sound waves. He could also use it to seal things like what he did previously. When Sima Xian saw Su Ming coughing out that mouthful of blood not too far away, his expression softened slightly. He was no longer as shocked as before. If Su Ming could truly dispel the first style of his god of Berserker's transformation without suffering any injuries, then Sima Xian would immediately turn around and run away. He would return to the first summit to isolate himself and avoid Su Ming. Yet once Su Ming coughed out that mouthful of blood, Sima Xian regained his confidence. He stared at Su Ming and took a deep breath. A grave look that had never appeared on his face before appeared on his face. He lifted his right hand slowly and pushed against the sky with his 5 fingers. If you can withstand my final style, then from now on, when I see you, I will immediately kneel down and worship you, Sima Xian said resolutely and clenched his fingers lightly in the air. During that instant, the sons of Berserker seeds that Sima Xian had placed in more than a dozen tribes in the land of South Morning trembled violently and fell to the ground at the same time, losing consciousness. Great art of heartless Berserker seed. Sima Xian's hair moved without wind, and a dark light appeared in his eyes. He spread his arms wide and looked incredibly enchanting as he floated in midair. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 243. The moment Sima Xian said those words, the people around him moved back once again, opening up a larger area for the battlefield. These people's gazes were no longer focused on Sima Xian, but they would occasionally look at Su Ming with complicated expressions. Su Ming rarely spoke, as if he was used to being silent to them. However, the battle between Su Ming and Sima Xian had left a deep impression on the Freezing Sky clan disciples from the 8 summits. All the disdainful words they had said just now had disappeared into thin air. Su Ming used his actions to crush all those disdain and contempt, melting them into the hearts of the people who said those words. At that moment, Su Ming was already an existence that was equal to Sima Xian in the eyes of the crowd. Even if he was slightly inferior, the fact that he could fight against Sima Xian until now and force him to use the great art of Heartless Berserker Seed was already enough to show that he was different. From this day onwards, Su Ming's name would be like a whirlwind. As it spread out, many people would remember his name in their hearts. Perhaps there would be another prodigy in Freezing Sky Clan in the future, but this person belonged to the 9th Summit. He was not a senior brother or junior brother. He was an Uncle Master Su, who was ranked 4th in the 9th Summit. However, when Han Songzi, who was on the 3rd peak, heard Sima Xian's words, her expression immediately changed. She faintly felt that there was something wrong with Sima Xian's words. It was as if there was something within those words that made her hair stand on end. It was as if it was not as simple as it seemed. There was a murderous aura that she could not tell where it came from. That's not right. That's not right. Han Songzi mumbled and frowned as she thought about those words carefully. At the same time, Han Feizi was also watching from the 4th Summit. Unlike Han Songzi, she did not pay any attention to Sima Xian's words. Instead, she was looking at Su Ming, and shock appeared on her face. Su Ming's strength had once again surpassed Han Feizi's expectations. This sort of change even made her feel that if this continued, then the distance between them would only grow. On the 4th Summit, the old left preceptor in red robes had a displeased look on his face. The others might not understand the meaning behind Sima Xian's words, but he did. Preposterous. The old man let out a cold harumph. He swept his gaze past the quiet 9th Summit and fell into pensive silence. The long-haired woman who sat cross-legged on the protruding stone platform of the 7th peak also frowned. She looked at Sima Xian in the distance with disgust in her eyes. "I've read some ancient records," she said softly. "There's a saying from the outer domain that goes something like this." The other women behind her all had expressions of eagerness and excitement on their faces. To be able to receive guidance from their eldest sister was a very fortunate thing. When there is a Tao without techniques, techniques can be obtained. When there is a Tao without techniques, techniques can be stopped. I might not understand what the Tao of the other worlds is, but now. The woman swept her gaze past Su Ming and Sima Xian in the distance, and a pensive look appeared on her face. Tian Xiezi continued drinking wine from his gourd as he sat at the top of the 9th Summit. He turned a deaf ear to what was happening outside the mountain. His second senior brother, who was squatting down at the mountainside and tending to his plants, frowned and put down the plants in his hands. He stood up and looked into the distance. Sima Xian's words were still echoing in the air above the group of palaces located at the center of the 9 summits under Heaven Gate. All of Sima Xian's divine abilities were based on the great art of Heartless Berserker Seed. Even the god of Berserker's transformation art would have different transformations depending on the person who practiced it. Sima Xian's great art of Heartless Berserker Seed originated from his great art of Heartless Berserker Seed. This art was created by the second god of Berserkers, and it contained an unfathomable power. It was rumored that the second god of Berserkers had used this art to enslave the people from the other worlds and obtain the right to become the god of Berserkers. He might not have reached the same heights as the first god of Berserkers, but it was enough for him to command the wind and clouds. Sima Xian had spent a lot of effort to practice this art. Just searching for the Berserker seeds alone had taken up a lot of his time and energy. Unless absolutely necessary, he would not forcefully cast this divine ability to fight against his enemies. Because once he used this divine ability too much, the Berserker seeds planted in the Berserker seed would die, just like Feng Mu. This was a consequence that Sima Xian could not bear. It would cause his great art of Heartless Berserker Seed to come to a halt, and he would need to search for a sufficient amount of Berserker Seeds before he could start again. Yet now, Sima Xian did not hesitate too much and decided to cast this art on Su Ming. This was not because he was reckless or impulsive, but because he had made this decision after careful consideration. He would rather give up on all the Berserker Seeds so that he could obtain a new Berserker Seed. And that new Berserker Seed was Su Ming. Su Ming's growth speed, his terrifying potential, and his act of dispersing his god of Berserker's transformation art not only shocked Sima Xian, but also made a wicked thought rise in his heart. That thought was to plant the Berserker Seed in Su Ming's body and turn him into Sima Xian's Berserker Seed. If he becomes my Berserker Seed, then with his growth speed and his potential, even if I have to give up on all the other Berserker Seeds, it'll still be worth it. After all, it might not be easy to find outstanding Berserker Seeds, but people like Su Ming are even harder to find. Now that I've met him, I won't be able to accept it if I let him go. Sima Xian's eyes sparkled, and when he looked at Su Ming, his gaze was filled with a strangeness that was hidden very deeply. The reason why he had said that if Su Ming could withstand this art, then he would kneel down and worship him when he ran into him in the future was not in line with his personality. If there was no specific meaning behind those words, he would not have acted so foolishly. Those words were the same as him forcing himself into a corner. He had to win, or else he would not be able to bear the consequences. In truth, he had said those words because it was a hint that suited his art before he cast the Berserker Seed. It could also be said to be a lure. Once he buried those words in Su Ming's heart, it would turn into a lure. The more Su Ming cared about it, the heavier the weight of those words would become. With that as a lure, he would form a strange connection with Sima Xian. That connection might be illusory and imaginary, but this sort of lure was the karmic connection that the great art of Heartless Berserker Seed focused on. He would use victory as a lure and bury it in his words before gathering the seed. If Sima Xian won this battle, then this seed would immediately turn into a real Berserker Seed step by step with a unique method. Even if he lost, then every single time he saw Su Ming, he would kneel down and worship him. As long as Su Ming's emotions wavered slightly, those emotions would turn into nutrients for the Berserker Seed to appear and grow. This was the strange and domineering nature of the great art of Heartless Berserker Seed that very few people had managed to understand over the course of countless years. As long as there was a weakness in the mind, then with this art, the person could magnify that weakness endlessly and take advantage of it. He would not seize the person's spirit, but he would be able to borrow the person's spirit and the person's power to give it to himself in an unseen manner. This sort of divine ability was too domineering. If a person did not completely understand all the ways to operate this art, then the chances of success would not be high. Unless the person suppressed the person's power and forcefully planted the seed, then they would need to be lucky. If he won this battle, then he would be able to obtain such a shocking berserker seed. If he lost this battle, then he would also be able to slowly make Sima Xian fall into his trap. To Sima Xian, the only thing he would have to lose was a bit of his reputation. This was something Sima Xian could endure. At that moment, he was floating in midair. As he spread out his arms, the presence coming from his body started increasing at a shocking speed. In fact, it even gave off a faint feeling that he was in the bone sacrifice realm. Su Ming frowned. When he heard Sima Xian's words, they seemed to contain a feeling he could not describe. It was as if those words had crawled into his heart and were echoing nonstop. At that moment, an anxious voice suddenly rang out from the third peak. Su Ming, don't fight. He wants a plant. That voice belonged to Han Tsangzi. But the moment she finished speaking, Sima Xian let out a cold harumph, immediately causing Han Tsangzi's voice to fall silent. Yet even if she did not finish speaking, the battle was already fated to be unable to continue, because right after Sima Xian let out that cold harumph, the left preceptor's dark voice immediately reverberated within freezing Sky Clan from the fourth summit. Fighting is strictly forbidden within the school. Don't the two of you understand? That voice was not loud, but there was an awe-inspiring tone to it. As it traveled forth, each word was like a clap of thunder that grew louder and louder until it eventually turned into an endless amount of echoes. It was as if there were tens of thousands of people roaring at the same time, causing the weather to change, the clouds to tumble backwards, and even the ice on the ground to tremble. Sima Xian's body froze. It was as if there was thunder roaring in his ears. His presence was broken, and he took 3 steps back. Blood trickled down the corners of his mouth. It was the same for Su Ming. His ears roared, and his face immediately turned pale. He took 5 steps back, and, as blood flowed out of his mouth, faint bell chimes immediately echoed from Han Mountain Bell in his body. Sima Xian, Su Ming is your senior. It's only right for him to stop you from entering the 7-colored mountain. You're in the wrong. You're not allowed to leave the first summit for 3 months. Hurry up and go. Sima Xian's expression changed. He eventually lowered his head and bowed towards the 4th summit. With a dark face, he turned around and put away the 7-colored mountain. He looked at the girl who was still looking at him, nodded, and flew towards the 1st summit. As for the rest of you, leave now. As the left preceptor's voice echoed in the air, the people in the area immediately bowed towards the 4th summit respectfully before looking at Su Ming. Some of them even wrapped their fists in their palms with a smile before they quickly left, causing the place to gradually return to normal. As for the girl who looked almost identical to Bai Ling, but was not Bai Ling, she hesitated for a moment before she looked at Su Ming. There was still hostility in her eyes, but for the first time, she spoke to him. You asked for my name just now. This isn't a secret. You're a disciple of Freezing Sky Clan, so you'll know sooner or later. My name is Bai Su. I hope that you can return Big Brother Sima's things. Taking away other people's things for no reason is a despicable act. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 244. Su Ming turned around and was about to walk towards Hu Zi when he paused, but only for a moment. Then, without turning his head back, he walked towards Hu Zi, who was snoring on the ground. When Bai Su saw Su Ming acting as if he did not hear her, she frowned and disgust appeared on her face. She turned around and chased after Sima Xian. Her movements were graceful, especially when she turned around and left. She drew out a wild beauty in the wind. Right up till the end, Su Ming never once turned his head back to look at Bai Su. To him, this woman seemed to be no different from the others. The only thing that existed between them was the ripple of emotions that had appeared previously due to their similar appearances. Yet at that moment, those ripples turned into calmness. The only thing that remained in his heart was not Bai Su, but the attitude of the fourth summit's left preceptor. His words that echoed in the air just now were clearly biased towards him. I'm not familiar with the left preceptor. If he did this, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and his master, Tian Xie, appeared in his head. Hu Zi was still snoring. A lot of drool was flowing out of the corners of his mouth. There was a silly grin on his face, as if he was very happy in his dreams. Ziche stood by the side respectfully. When he saw Su Ming walking over, he immediately wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed. Greetings, Uncle Master Su. His respect did not seem to be fake, but had truly come from the bottom of his heart. Once he witnessed Su Ming and Sima Xian's battle, he had repeatedly rejoiced in his heart that he had run into Su Ming's second senior brother when he had gone to cause trouble for him. If he had fought against Su Ming at that time, then Ziche would not have the slightest bit of confidence that he could win against Su Ming in the face of all the changes in his divine abilities. If he could force Sima Xian to use the great art of Heartless Berserker Seed, then this Su Ming will definitely be extraordinary in Freezing Sky Clan in the future. Ziche was certain of this in his heart, especially when he remembered the murderous aura he felt from Su Ming's body and his calm words in Hu Zi's cave abode. That respect instantly turned into reverence. Su Ming nodded. The moment his feet landed on the ground, Hefeng charged towards him in a pathetic manner. Due to Sima Xian's departure, the soul of the Ice Wolf had also left with him. Hefeng approached Su Ming with a slight shiver, but when he looked at Su Ming, there was an even greater respect in his eyes compared to Ziche's. It could be said that he had watched Su Ming walk step by step from when he was still very weak to where he was now. The difference between the current Su Ming and the one in the past was like heaven and earth. It was precisely because he had seen it with his own eyes that his respect towards Su Ming was much greater compared to the others. He knew that Su Ming was not a kind person. He was ruthless and vengeful. Master, Hefeng bowed deeply towards Su Ming with shame on his face. Master, this lowly one's strength is inferior to that Lang Hun. But don't worry, Master. This lowly one will definitely cultivate diligently, and sooner or later, I will become Master's arm. I won't embarrass you. Hefeng raised his head and patted his chest as he promised. Come back. Su Ming cast Hefeng a glance and seized the air with his right hand. Immediately, Spirit Plunder and Han Mountain Bell charged towards Su Ming. Once they circled around him a few times, Spirit Plunder was put away into his storage bag. As for Han Mountain Bell, it fused with Su Ming's body and gradually disappeared. When Hefeng also disappeared from Su Ming's body, Su Ming turned around and looked at his destination, the artifact storage hall. At that moment, the young man who Hu Zi had pointed at and told Su Ming to be a woman disguised as a man stood outside the artifact storage hall. When she saw Su Ming looking at her, her expression was completely different from before Sima Xian returned. At that time, he was filled with disgust and resignation. If he could avoid it, he would. Because he disliked Hu Zi, he also disliked all the people who followed Hu Zi. Yet now, there was respect on his face. The moment Su Ming's gaze fell on him, he immediately took a few steps forward and wrapped his fist in his palm before bowing deeply towards Su Ming. I am Chen Xiang. Greetings, Uncle Master Su. Chen Xiang was very beautiful. Her features were as beautiful as a picture, but she was intentionally hiding it. Her skin was slightly dark, as if it covered up the light from the pearls, causing others to be unable to tell whether she was a man or a woman at first glance. She wore a wide robe that covered her body. If Hu Zi had not mentioned that this person was a woman disguised as a man, Su Ming would not have been able to see anything wrong with her. Yet now that his gaze fell on her, he gradually noticed something different about her. However, Su Ming did not look at her for too long. He averted his gaze. I want to go to the artifact storage hall and choose some papers. Please do me a favor. Su Ming did not put on the airs of an uncle master. His tone was calm as he spoke to Chen Xiang. Chen Xiang quickly nodded and took a few steps back to make way for Su Ming with a respectful look on her face. Uncle Master Su, please. I am usually in charge of the artifact storage hall. Please go in and wait for a moment. I will bring you the papers you need." Under Chun Xiang's respectful guidance, Su Ming walked into the artifact storage hall. As for Ziche, he stayed outside to take care of the snoring Huzi. Without Su Ming's orders, he did not dare follow him in. If this had happened before Su Ming fought against Sima Xian, Ziche might have done the same, but it would not have been something as if he did not dare to follow Su Ming. Yet now that he had witnessed Su Ming's strength, Ziche suddenly gained a new understanding of the Ninth Summit. To him, all the people in the mountain were strange, but even if they were strange, besides Huzi, all of them were powerful berserkers. The gentle man who liked flowers was one of them. The murderous Su Ming before him was one of them, and their eldest senior brother, the person who was always in isolation, was one of them. Ziche guessed that he should be someone even stronger. This is the true Ninth Summit. The other rumors are all fake. Only when you enter the Ninth Summit will you understand the strange people who live in this mountain and how terrifying they are. Ziche took a deep breath. He had a feeling that entering the Ninth Summit just like this was not a bad thing for him. There was a high possibility that this was also a chance for him. As he thought about it, Huzi's rhythmic snoring traveled into his ears. That snoring did not sound too loud during the day, but if it was a quiet night and someone heard that snoring in the forest, their expressions would definitely change, and they would think that a huge insect or a ferocious beast had appeared. The snoring was like a roar that shook all those who heard it. Ziche turned his head around and cast a glance at Huzi. Gradually, a strange look appeared in his eyes. This person might not be an ordinary person. He remembered when he was in Huzi's cave abode and how his hands were held by this person as he fell asleep in his dreams, and his face gradually turned pale. Intruder dream. If he can bring people into his dreams at any time, then this sort of power is incredibly terrifying. Monsters. The Ninth Summit is full of monsters. The more Ziche thought about it, the more anxious he became, but at the same time, the more shocked he was, the more tempted he became. Su Ming sat on the chair in the artifact storage hall. There was an oil lamp on the table beside him. It might be daytime, but the light from the fire still shone brightly and spread through the area. The artifact storage hall was not big, but it was not small either. There were rows of shelves, and all sorts of items were placed on them. Some of them looked broken, but some of them were brand new. Occasionally, Chun Xiang would appear beside the rows of shelves. He was walking quickly around the place, taking down different pieces of paper. After a moment, he brought the papers to Su Ming and placed them on the table respectfully. Then, he took a few steps back and lowered his head to speak softly. "Uncle Master Su, the items in the artifact storage hall are not complete. There are only these types of papers here. Take a look and see which type you need. I'll go and get more." These papers are usually used by the disciples from the various summits to take notes. If you think it's not enough, there are many bamboo slips. As Chun Xiang spoke, she sized up Su Ming from the corner of her eye. Su Ming nodded and looked at the papers on the table. Most of them were coarse and dark brown in color. Some of them could not even compare to bee skins. When Chun Xiang saw Su Ming frowning slightly, she quickly said, "This is Uncle Master Su. There are only these here. Why don't you take a look and see whether there are any substitutes?" When Su Ming heard this, he got up and walked towards the rows of shelves. Before he walked far, he suddenly stopped and pointed at an item by his side, then looked at Chun Xiang. "How many of these are there?" Chun Xiang followed behind Su Ming and immediately looked in the direction he was pointing. He was pointing at a white wooden block that was about the length of an arm and the width of a palm. Its color was extremely white, and it looked spotless. "This is sharp white wood. This type of wood can't be found near Freezing Sky Clan. I heard that it's produced about 100,000 lis to the east of Freezing Sky Clan. Due to its beautiful color, it's often used to make chairs. I still have some of this with me." As Chun Xiang spoke, she quickly took a few steps forward. After a moment, she brought back a dozen something of this type of wood. "Uncle Master Su, this is all I have. Thank you. This will be enough." Su Ming smiled faintly and took the white wooden blocks. With a flick of his right hand, the wooden blocks immediately disappeared and were sent into his storage bag. As for the cost of buying these wooden blocks, Su Ming looked at Chen Xiang, not knowing what to say. Uncle Master Su, you're being too polite. You just arrived in Freezing Sky Clan, and these items aren't that expensive. I can still make the decision. You can take them. Chen Xiang quickly waved her hand and smiled. At that moment, her smile naturally revealed her disguise as a woman disguised as a man. However, Su Ming believed that Hu Zi was not the first person to see through this. Everyone had their own stories that they did not want to talk about. There had to be a reason why Chen Xiang had been dressing up like this for so many years in Freezing Sky Clan. Then thank you. Su Ming did not refuse and nodded at Chen Xiang. By the way, Uncle Master Su, you must be using this sharp white wood to make your own wooden slips. If that's the case, you'll need some special string. As Chen Xiang spoke, she brought out a white spool of thread from her sleeve and handed it to Su Ming. I saw this when I was looking for sharp white wood just now. It's been here for many years. I heard that it's the tendon of some ferocious beast. It's very sturdy and should be able to be used to connect the wooden slips. Su Ming did not take it. Chapter 245. Su Ming did not immediately speak. Instead, he stood there and stared at the cross-dressing Chen Xiang before him. There was a sharp look in his eyes, and when they landed on Chen Xiang's face, she felt as if her heart had been pierced through, and she could see the depths of her heart. Chen Xiang's heart trembled. She lowered her head without looking into his eyes and took a few steps back once again. Speak. I'll think about it, Su Ming said calmly. His voice was neither fast nor slow. If Uncle Master Su wants to help, you can definitely do it. Chen Xiang bit her bottom lip. At that moment, she revealed a lot of her feminine side without even realizing it. Uncle Master Su, please help me. Make Uncle Master Sunda, who stopped patrolling outside my room at night. I'm not used to this, Chen Xiang said in a low voice, and with great difficulty, she managed to find a more tactful way to express her meaning. Once she finished speaking, she bowed slightly toward Su Ming. Uncle Master Su, please help me. A strange look instantly appeared on Su Ming's face. He had thought of a lot of possibilities, but he did not expect that Chen Xiang had given him the wooden block and tendon thread just for this. From this, it could be seen just how great of a shadow Hu Zi was in this person's heart. When he remembered how Hu Zi had brought him here from the 9th summit before he fell asleep, and all the things they had encountered on the way, Su Ming could not help but smile wryly. I'll try my best to persuade him, but I can't guarantee that I'll succeed. Su Ming hesitated for a moment. If he was being honest, he also did not want someone to occasionally crouch outside at night and watch his every move. When he remembered the strange smile on Hu Zi's lips when he peeked at his second senior brother, it was not difficult for Su Ming to imagine that Hu Zi would definitely still be smiling when he peeked at other people. He looked at Chen Xiang with slight pity. When she heard Su Ming's words, gratitude instantly appeared on her face. That gratitude did not seem fake, but came from the bottom of her heart. It could be seen just how much Hu Zi had been harassing her. To Chen Xiang, asking her Uncle Master Hu Zi, who was like a nightmare at night, to leave was the most important thing she could do at that moment. Under Chen Xiang's gratitude and respect, Su Ming walked out of the artifact storage hall. Chen Xiang followed behind him, and in the end, she still bowed deeply towards Su Ming. The hope in her eyes made Su Ming instinctively cast a glance at Hu Zi, who was snoring behind Zi Che, not too far away. I'll do my best. Su Ming nodded at Chen Xiang and walked towards Hu Zi. Once he picked him up, he took a step in the air and turned into a long arc that charged towards the 9th summit. Zi Che quickly followed behind him. As he looked at Su Ming's back, a resolute look appeared in his eyes. Before long, the two of them arrived at the 9th summit from the group of palaces under Heaven Gate. On the way, Su Ming ran into some Freezing Sky Clan disciples. Once they saw him, some of them who recognized him immediately stopped moving and wrapped their fists in their palms to greet him. Only when Su Ming left did they move. There were not many people calling out Uncle Master Su's name on the way, but it was still different from what Su Ming had encountered previously. They were not. not, and they, and Su, and who Z's, Chun, Chen, Shan, Su's eyes, and Chun, Chen's. And when he saw, and he, Chen Xiang Su. When he saw Hu Zi snoring loudly, a smile appeared on Su Ming's face. He brought out a wine gourd from the side and placed it at a spot where Hu Zi could touch it. Only then did he turn around and leave. As he looked at Hu Zi snoring loudly, a smile appeared on Su Ming's face. He brought out a wine gourd from the side and placed it at a spot where Hu Zi could touch it before he turned around and left. Ziche was standing respectfully outside the cave. When he saw Su Ming coming out, he immediately lowered his head and looked as if he was waiting for his orders. Ziche fell silent. There was an awkward look on his face as he lowered his head and did not speak. But if you can bring me 2 corpses from the living dead, then I'll get rid of that thought, Su Ming said calmly. He already had a plan in his heart. His most important task in Freezing Sky Clan's 9th summit was to train. He had to become stronger. Only by doing so would he be able to win against Sima Xian in the near future, and he would be able to walk out of Sky Mist Barrier and out of the land of South Morning. He had to become stronger. Only then would he be able to win against Sima Xian in the near future, and he would be able to walk out of Sky Mist Barrier and out of the land of South Morning. All of this required great power. Su Ming might have seemed to have been on par with Sima Xian when he fought against him, but he knew that in truth, he had lost that battle. If his master had not interfered and given him enough time to copy the power of the world in that sword slash, then he would have definitely lost when that sword slash came crashing down. Even if Tian Xie had helped him, when Sima Xian cast the great art of Heartless Berserker Seed, Su Ming could clearly feel a strong sense of danger. That sense of danger was not something he could resolve with his current level of cultivation. Even if he still had 1 treasure left, the fire ice his eldest senior brother had given him, he still had not brought it out. After all, that item was an external object and not his own. All of this made Su Ming understand clearly that his level of cultivation was still very weak. With this level of cultivation, forget going home, he could not even get out of Sky Mist Barrier. In fact, he could not even do as he pleased in Freezing Sky Clan. All of these thoughts have been running through Su Ming's head for a long time on his way back. Uncle Master Su, it's not hard to get a corpse. I can promise you that within 3 years, I will definitely get you 2 corpses with great power. The shamans outside Sky Mist Barrier are the best choice, Ziche quickly said respectfully. As Ziche spoke, Su Ming had already walked into the distance with his back turned towards him, as if he did not hear Ziche's voice. He continued walking forward, and when Ziche saw Su Ming's body almost disappearing in the midst of his anxiety, Su Ming's voice traveled into his ears unhurriedly. I lack a guard outside my cave abode. If you're willing, then come with me. Ziche's spirits lifted, and he immediately shouted, I'm willing. As he spoke, he immediately charged forward and followed behind Su Ming, disappearing from Hu Zi's cave abode. Su Ming returned to his cave abode. At that moment, this simple cave abode was different from before. There was a hint of warmth in it, and it gave off the feeling of home. The platform outside the cave abode was filled with grass growing in the ice. However, there was a small empty spot. That was the place Su Ming had asked his second senior brother to leave behind for him, the place where he could meditate. The grass swayed in the cold wind, as if it was struggling to survive in this cold land. There was a tenacious life force within them, and as Su Ming looked at them, he felt as if he was looking at his second senior brother. He suddenly came to a slight understanding as to why his second senior brother had planted flowers and plants all over most of the 9th summit. It was because this was his home, and he was just like the flowers and plants. Wherever he was, he had to protect it. For example, there were no plants here previously, but once Su Ming opened up his cave abode here, his second senior brother came and covered the entire place with his plants. A silent warmth came from the plants swaying in the wind, and Su Ming could feel it. He crouched down and looked at the plants. The smile on his face was one of warmth that he rarely saw ever since he came to the land of South Morning. That smile only existed in Su Ming's heart when he was in Dark Mountain, and it was also reflected on his face. Ziche stood by the side respectfully and looked at Su Ming. When he saw the smile on Su Ming's face, a dazed look appeared on his face. It was as if the person before him was no longer the murderous Uncle Master Su who could fight against Sima Xen, but a young man who had just grown up, and there was still a hint of youthfulness that had yet to fade away. However, that dazed look only lasted for a moment. When Su Ming stood up and the smile on his face disappeared, the feeling that Ziche did not know whether it was just a figment of his imagination immediately disappeared. The young man who had just grown up was gone. In his place was the calm Uncle Master Su with a murderous aura. Without my summons, you are not allowed to step into my cave abode. Stay outside and listen to my orders. Su Ming's cold voice traveled into his ears, and he walked towards the cave abode that did not have a door. Yes. Ziche's expression was respectful, and he immediately obeyed. He took a few steps back and chose a spot that was away from the wind to sit down cross-legged. A dazed look appeared in his eyes for a moment, but it was soon replaced by determination. 3 years. Perhaps these 3 years aren't a disaster for me, but a serendipity. I hope that's the case. Ziche closed his eyes and immersed himself in meditation, but his mind was focused on his surroundings. He was like a guard and servant, doing what he was supposed to do. At that moment, Su Ming also sat down cross-legged in his cave abode. As he looked at the sky beyond the entrance of his cave abode darkening, he slowly brought out the sharp white wood he had obtained from the artifact storage hall. Once he placed them before himself, he also brought out the ferocious beast tendon. That tendon had great tenacity. Even if it was just a small section, it could still be stretched to a very long length. The sharp white wood were not all the same size. Some were long, some were short, some were as thick as 3 fingers wide, and some were as thick as 2 fingers wide. Su Ming looked at the wood, and after a moment of pensive silence, he quickly lifted his hands and grabbed a piece of wood. As he swung his arms, a large amount of wood chips flew into the air. After a moment, he put it down and picked up another piece. After a long while, when Su Ming had tidied up all the pieces of wood, there were 9 pieces of wood placed before him. Each of them was as long as an arm, as wide as 5 fingers, and as tall as 2 fingers. They looked exactly the same. All of them were white, and at first glance, no one would be able to tell that they were made of wood, but white jade. Once Su Ming placed the 9 pieces of wood side by side, a large drawing board was placed before him. There might be a small crack in the middle of each piece of wood, but if he squeezed it with force, he could cover up the crack. Then, Su Ming held the ferocious beast tendon in his hand, and green light shone at the center of his brows. The small sword flew out and cut the beast tendon into several pieces, then tied them to the wooden strips on the drawing board. Due to the tendon's natural elasticity, the cracks on the drawing board disappeared, but if he used force to roll the drawing board up like how he would roll a bee's skin, then the drawing board would turn into a cylinder due to the tension. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 246. As he looked at the drawing board he had personally created, Su Ming lifted his right hand and gently stroked it. The drawing board was flat and did not feel rough when he touched it. From now on, you will accompany me to understand the creation of the world. Su Ming mumbled and slowly closed his eyes. At that moment, the sky outside had already darkened completely. Cold wind moaned as it blew past them. That wind blew on the 9th summit and swept past the platform outside Su Ming's cave abode. Some of it entered his cave abode and occasionally lifted Su Ming's long hair. Su Ming closed his eyes. He did not try to understand the world. Neither did he immerse himself in his training. His mind was blank, but in that blank space, a woman's figure slowly appeared. That woman had a sweet smile on her face. Her eyes sparkled, causing all those who saw her to be attracted by her beauty. As her figure became clearer, a wild beauty could be sensed from her. It was as if she was a flower that was not bound and was freely blooming in the forest. She let out a natural fragrance that was incredibly attractive. She was dressed in white, and, as she smiled, she looked as if she was looking at Su Ming. "Bai Ling, Bai Su," Su Ming mumbled. With his eyes closed, he lifted his right hand and started drawing on the white wooden drawing board he had just made with his finger as a brush. With each stroke, an illusionary line would appear on the drawing board. To others, that illusionary line would appear empty and could not be seen. It was as if there were no lines on it. Since he did not have a brush and could only touch it with his finger, he would not be able to leave behind any marks. However, Su Ming was the only one who could see what he was drawing because of his mind's guidance. Perhaps more accurately speaking, he was drawing an image of his mind. He was drawing his feelings and his presence. It was only natural that he would not be able to see it with the naked eye. Time trickled by. The cold wind howled even louder in the middle of the night. The cave abode was silent. Only the sound of Su Ming's finger continuously touching the drawing board could be heard. Yet in the wind, the sound was incredibly faint and could not be heard. When the night passed and the sun gradually appeared at the end of the sky, Su Ming's right hand paused on the drawing board and he opened his eyes. He looked at the drawing board. To anyone else, the drawing board was no different from the previous night. It was completely blank. Yet in Su Ming's eyes, a woman's figure appeared on the drawing board. The woman was dressed in white and had a sweet smile on her face. She looked very lifelike, but she had no eyes. Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he lifted his right hand abruptly and drew a few lines at the empty spots where the woman's eyes should have been. In his eyes, the woman on the drawing board immediately gained eyes, and there was a light that could captivate people's souls shining within them. However, there was a wave of disgust within that light, causing her entire presence to change, as if she was questioning Su Ming. "She is by Su." Su Ming mumbled softly to himself. There was a calm look in his eyes, and he looked at the woman on the drawing board for a long while before he flicked the drawing board with his right hand. Immediately, the drawing board began to shake fiercely, and a thin layer of powder shattered and bounced off its surface, as if a layer of muslin had been lifted, and the muslin that was lifted was the drawing of a white figure. As the powder was lifted like muslin by Su Ming with a flick of his finger, the cold wind blew in from outside the cave abode, sweeping up the powder and blowing past the edges of Su Ming's body, causing it to dissipate. Once it disappeared, the drawing board turned blank once again before Su Ming's eyes. Not a single trace of the woman could be found on it. It was just like his heart. As he drew peacefully for the night, the slight shock that was caused by the woman's appearance disappeared without a trace, unable to fuse into his heart. At that moment, it was already bright outside. Sunlight shone in through the entrance of the cave abode, and it was as if light was devouring darkness. It stopped 3 feet away from Su Ming. He could see the circular reflection of Sunlight City 3 feet away from him, but the spot where he sat was still in darkness. In silence, Su Ming put down the drawing board. A glint appeared in his eyes, and he brought out Han Mountain Bell. The moment the bell appeared, banging sounds immediately came from within. Clearly, the insect that looked like a stick was still struggling to break out. Su Ming looked at the bell, and a cold glint appeared in his eyes. During his fight against Sima Exine, he had gained a slight understanding towards the power of the world contained in that sword slash. Besides that, he had also gained something from this insect within Han Mountain Bell. To him, this creature looked like a strange insect, but Sima Exine had once said that it was a snake. Su Ming did not have time to think about this at that time. As he calmed himself down, he lifted his right hand and flicked the shrunken Han Mountain Bell before him. The moment he flicked the bell chimes reverberated in the air. However, the bell chimes did not spread outwards. Instead, they reverberated within the bell for a long time. Faint, shrill cries could be heard coming from within the bell. As the bell chimes trembled, the insect's struggles quickly weakened, but it would still occasionally crash into the bell. Su Ming waited for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. When the insect stopped struggling against the bell, only incredibly weak cries could be heard faintly. Su Ming pointed at Han Mountain Bell with his right hand, and immediately the bell gradually grew larger. Once it was 10 feet tall, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he made a strange pose with his right hand in a rather jerky manner. This was a method to control the bell that had naturally appeared in his head once he took it as his possession. Once he made that strange pose, Su Ming pushed forward with his right hand. Immediately, Han Mountain Bell shuddered, and gradually, ripples appeared on its surface. Then, right before Su Ming's eyes, the bell became transparent, allowing him to clearly see the insect snake that looked like a small rod in the place sealed within the bell. At that moment, its body was curled up like an arrow that had its bowstring drawn. It looked as if it was about to release a shocking power at any moment. There were no signs of it being heavily injured. The eyes on its head shone with a ghastly, chilling glare, as if it was waiting for a chance. But that was not all. Su Ming saw with his own eyes that the insect was clearly full of energy and was ready to attack. But when it opened its mouth, under its murderous gaze, an incredibly weak wail came from its mouth. What a smart insect! A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. The insect's intelligence made a cold sneer appear on his lips. He immediately flicked the bell a few times with his right hand, causing booming sounds to reverberate within the bell, turning into a large amount of sound waves that spread outwards. The insect's expression immediately twisted, but it withstood it. As it continued wailing rhythmically, it eventually stopped making any sound. If anyone judged whether it was dead or alive based on its sounds, then there was a high possibility that it would be thought to be on the verge of death. However, Su Ming could clearly see that even though the insect was trembling slightly, its body was still bent, ready to attack. The brutal and bloodthirsty glare in its eyes did not diminish, but instead became even stronger due to the pain it was in. This scene made Su Ming's expression change. "How did Sima Xin subdue this thing?" he mumbled. By the looks of this creature's ferocious nature, it was clear that it was incredibly difficult to subdue it. "I like to see the limits of this insect." Su Ming's gaze was cold. He lifted his right hand, but he did not flick his finger. Instead, he slammed his palm against Han Mountain Bell. The instant his palm landed, the booming sounds within the bell immediately reached their peak. That violent sound might have sounded weak outside the bell, but within the bell, it was like a raging storm that turned into a crazed impact. The insect immediately started trembling viciously. As if its bent body could no longer withstand the impact, it gradually slowed down, and eventually it completely uncurled and let out a shrill howl. As it howled, cracks appeared on its body, and a milky white liquid flowed out like blood. Its face immediately became dispirited, and its spread wings drooped downwards. However, the brutality in its eyes did not diminish. Instead, it became so strong that it looked as if it had gone mad. The brutality in its eyes became even stronger. It was as if it had a chance to escape from this place. Then the person who brought it such pain would be the one to suffer from its crazed vengeance. Su Ming remained calm. Once he lifted his right hand, he slammed his palm against Han Mountain Bell once again. Instantly, the booming sounds within the bell rose to a new height. As the bell chimes rang, the insect's wings were immediately torn apart and shattered into two pieces. Its body trembled as if it was about to collapse. A large amount of white blood flowed out from its body, and it fell to the ground like soft mud. There was not an ounce of strength left in its body, as if its life had come to an end. However, Su Ming could not see submission in its eyes, neither could he see despair. All he could see was the murderous flame that surged into the sky. It was as if that flame would not extinguish until the insect died. Su Ming lifted his right hand for the third time. He knew that if he placed his hand on the bell this time, the insect would immediately die. After all, the insect's forte lay in its speed and its penetrative power that shocked even Su Ming, not its ability to protect itself. After a moment of silence, Su Ming gradually lowered his right hand and looked at the insect in Han Mountain Bell. Not only did he see brutality and tenacity in the insect's eyes, he also saw the insect's loyalty towards its previous master, Sima Xin. He could see the loyalty hidden beneath the brutality in the insect's eyes because he had once seen the same look in the eyes of the fire monkey, Xiaohong, when he was in Dark Mountain. Xiaohong. Su Ming could not help but remember it. Su Ming closed his eyes. After a long while, he opened them slowly, and his eyes became calm once again. He looked at Han Mountain Bell and suddenly sent a few words into it. You have such intelligence, so you must be able to understand my words. Since you're so loyal to Sima Xin, then why don't we do an experiment? Let's see just how important you are to Sima Xin. Su Ming said slowly. The insect had clearly heard Su Ming's words and lifted its head swiftly, but it could not see Su Ming. It could only see the endless haziness around it. I'm very curious. What will Sima Xin do to you? What will he choose? Su Ming asked flatly. He suddenly lifted his right hand and tapped the center of his brows. At the same time, a large amount of stone coins flew out on their own from Su Ming's storage bag and floated in midair. Once they surrounded Su Ming, the power of the brand of his divine sense erupted forth from his body. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 247. The insect's unyieldingness, brutality, loyalty, and willingness to die made Su Ming know that he could not make this insect his, unless he was willing to spend a large amount of time, years, or even longer, to trap this creature without using Han Mountain Bell and destroy its consciousness so that it could become his pet. However, Su Ming could not afford to spend that amount of time, and neither could he afford to spend that amount of effort. However, Su Ming was slightly reluctant to kill it just like that. The insect's speed and penetrative power had left a deep impression on him. If he could make it his own and catch his opponent off guard, then it could become one of his incredibly powerful attacks. That was why, since he was reluctant and could not absorb it slowly over a long period of time, there was only one last method left before Su Ming. He had to forcefully leave his brand in the insect's mind. Even if he had to destroy its intelligence, once he left his brand on it, then he would immediately be able to use the insect. Even if this would cause the insect to betray him, it was still better than dying or being unable to use the insect. However, Su Ming had only used this branding art on someone's mind once before, and that was on Yifeng. Yifeng was the one who had taught him this art. Theoretically speaking, he should be able to brand the insect. In truth, Su Ming did not have much confidence. However, he had been practicing the branding art with his divine sense for a long time. Based on his understanding, if the target did not fight back, then it would be easy for him to succeed with this art. If he wanted to find a chance of success while the target was fighting back, then it would be the same as when two people were fighting against each other. He needed the other party to show a weakness. Once a weakness appeared, then it would be easier for Su Ming's divine sense to enter and leave his brand on the insect. If this weakness was a human, then it would be easier for him to deal with it. But this was a strange insect the size of a finger. It was not so easy to deal with. Fortunately, the insect's loyalty towards Sima Xin was clear to Su Ming. That was why he said those words earlier. He wanted to create a weakness for the insect. The moment this weakness appeared, Su Ming would immediately rush in with his divine sense. If he succeeded, then he would use the insect, but if he failed, then even if he was reluctant, he would not show any mercy. At that moment, the instant Su Ming spread his divine sense outwards, all of it gathered on Han Mountain Bell and seeped into it, turning into a windstorm that descended on the weakened strange insect. At the instant he completely enveloped it, Su Ming immediately sensed the insect's will resisting and struggling furiously. It was a will that refused to be controlled, even if it died. The impact it formed caused Su Ming's divine sense to freeze for a moment. If that's the case, then if my divine sense is strong enough, I won't need to find any openings to forcefully carve my brand. A thought appeared in Su Ming's mind. As the insect struggled, he gained a new understanding towards divine sense and this art. Under the cover of his divine sense, Su Ming quietly opened a crack on Han Mountain Bell. The instant that crack was opened, the insect's presence instantly spread out from within. Sima Xin, I've been waiting for you to create this weakness for me. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he focused his divine sense on the struggling insect. At that moment, in the first summit of the great frozen sky continent, there was an incredibly extravagant cave abode located very close to the top of the mountain. That cave abode looked like a towering hall, and within it, Sima XN was sitting cross-legged with a dark expression on his face as he meditated with his eyes closed. He was forbidden from leaving the mountain for the next few months. As he sat there, his battle with Su Ming would occasionally appear in his head. That battle had allowed him to truly understand Su Ming's strength. To him, Su Ming was like a sharp thorn stuck in his throat, and it was something he could not tolerate. Ever since Sima Xin was born, everything had been smooth sailing for him. When he entered Freezing Sky Clan, it was even more so. He was highly regarded by the older generation in the clan and was sought after by those of the same generation. He was also good at making friends, so it could be said that he had countless friends in Freezing Sky Clan. There were also quite a number of women among them who had been planted with the Berserker seed of love, whether intentionally or not. The older generation in the clan knew about this, but they did not stop him. Because of that, he felt even more at ease. When he traveled outside, all those who were chosen by him would find it difficult to escape from him to practice the great art of heartless Berserker seed. His original target was Bai Su. She had a great background, and many disciples did not know about her. They only thought she was a normal disciple of the Seventh Summit. However, Sima Xian had accidentally discovered that Bai Su's father was someone from the 7th layer of the 9 layers of Heaven Gate. Sima Xian did not know who it was. After all, even to him, Heaven Gate was a sacred and mysterious place. That place was the true core of Freezing Sky Clan, and it was also the place where the strongest power gathered. Heaven Gate disciples rarely walked down Heaven Gate and appeared before the disciples of the Great Frozen Plains. One of them was in the sky, and the other was on the ground. It was as if they were in 2 different worlds. Becoming a disciple of Heaven Gate was the dream of almost every single person in the Great Frozen Plains. However, only the masters of the summits could enter Heaven Gate, or else they would need to go through Freezing Sky Cave and obtain 1,000 shaman heads. I must enter Heaven Gate. Sima Xin clenched his fists. He had no feelings for Bai Su, but as they came into contact with each other, he could tell with just one glance that Bai Su seemed to have feelings for him. Of course, this feeling was something he had slowly developed when he traveled with her. His goal was not to plant the Berserker seed of love in her. After all, Bai Su's father was in Heaven Gate, and Sima Xian was wary of him. However, this did not stop him from getting in contact with Bai Su and asking for her help so that he could obtain the right to enter Freezing Sky Cave. After all, the activation of Freezing Sky Clan required 1,000 shaman heads, but he did not have enough. After all, if the shaman tribe did not invade him en masse, then if he wanted to obtain 1,000 heads, he would have to venture deep into Sky Mist Barrier. This was difficult for him. His plan was to first enter Freezing Sky Cave and increase his power there before he went to retrieve the shaman heads. By doing so, he would have more confidence in his success. This sort of cheating method was not allowed in Freezing Sky Clan. Other people could not understand why this was not allowed, but they could do nothing about it. Sima Xin did not want to do this. That was why he set his sights on Bai Su. As long as someone from Heaven Gate took the initiative to activate Freezing Sky Cave for the disciples of the Great Frozen Plains, then he would be able to fulfill his wish. He was also confident that with his great art of heartless Berserker seed, he would have a certain degree of certainty that he would succeed even if he sacrificed all his people. Once he succeeded, his power would increase by leaps and bounds. At that time, he would not have to worry about not being able to find any Berserker children. He might need a lot of time, but he believed that it was all worth it, until he met Su Ming. More accurately speaking, when he fought against Su Ming, a greedy thought appeared in his head. He wanted to plant the Berserker seed in Su Ming's body and turn him into his Berserker child. By doing so, he felt that not only would his chances of entering Freezing Sky Cave increase by a large margin, the increase in his power would also be different from what he had planned. There were a lot of benefits. There was even a possibility that not all of his Berserker children would die. These various benefits made Sima Xian's heart pound. Baisu has already promised me that she'll talk to her father about this. She'll do everything she can to make her father agree to this. She also told me that her father has never refused any of her requests. There's a high chance that she'll succeed. It's just that the time to enter has not been decided yet. By the looks of it now, I don't need to be in too much of a hurry. The most important thing now is to make Su Ming my berserker child. Sima Xian closed his eyes, and a myriad of thoughts spun in his head. It's a pity that I can't go down the mountain now. Even if I can come and go as I please when the time is right, it'll be difficult for me to come into contact with Su Ming. If I knew this would happen, I would have given up on Han Mountain Bell and befriended him. At that time, I could naturally plant the berserker seed in his heart. Sima Xian closed his eyes and frowned. As he was immersed in his thoughts, a thought suddenly appeared in his head. Baisu. Sima Xian opened his eyes, and there was a glint in them. When Su Ming saw Baisu, his expression was clearly off. He didn't seem to be faking it. A glint appeared in Sima Xian's eyes, and a smile gradually appeared on his lips. With love as a guide, turn it into a berserker seed. When it blooms, the love will be deep, and the heart will be cold without a trace. In an instant, the beauty of youth will fade away. If I, Sima Xian, can create this art of using love to train without a mind, then I can also make some changes. With Baisu as a guide, I can plant the berserker seed in Su Ming's body. Sima Xian mumbled, and there was a merciless, evil, and strange look in his smile. Su Ming, now that I, Sima Xian, value you, you can't escape. A glint appeared in Sima Xian's eyes, but at that moment, his expression suddenly changed. He lifted his head swiftly and immediately rushed out of his cave abode to look at the 9th summit in the distance. My snake treasure. Sima Xian's pupil shrank, and his expression instantly darkened. He could feel the presence of his snake treasure. Ever since the snake was captured by Su Ming, that presence had disappeared. Now that it had suddenly appeared, it stirred up the faint connection between Sima Xian and the snake. The reason why he could make the snake acknowledge him as its master was because he had once obtained a blood picture by chance. That picture had a long history, and he had only learned about it after looking through a lot of ancient scrolls. It could allow some strange, ferocious beasts to form a connection with the user, and from there, he could control them as if they were acknowledging him as their master. That blood picture belonged to the shaman tribe outside Sky Mist Barrier. However, the one Sima Xian obtained was already broken and could not be effective against ferocious beasts that were too strong. That was why when he saw the insect snake and saw its strength, he used the blood picture without hesitation when he noticed that the snake was still in its infancy. At that moment, he could clearly feel that the connection formed by the blood picture was being attacked. Even if it did not seem to be weakened, but after a moment, when the snake treasure's presence was about to disappear once again, Sima Xian hesitated. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 248. He knew that the disappearance of the snake's presence was not because Su Ming had subdued it, but because it was sealed by Han Mountain Bell once again, just like before. Yet even though he knew this, he still hesitated, but that hesitation only lasted for an instant before it turned into indifference. Planting the berserker seed is the most important. The snake is in Su Ming's hands. I might not have had much contact with him, but I can tell that he's a decisive person. He won't hesitate or drag his feet. If he can't subdue the snake, then he'll definitely think of a way to kill it. If that's the case, then since you're going to die anyway, why don't you help me before you die? At least you'll die a worthy death. Sima Xian endured the pain in his heart, and determination appeared in his eyes. It's a pity that the snake hasn't grown up yet. Oh well, oh well. Sima Xian lifted his right hand and tapped his chest. Immediately, his robes were torn to shreds and disappeared, revealing a circular, blood-red picture on his chest. At first glance, that blood-red picture looked like a sun, but if anyone took a closer look, they would gradually be able to see the indistinct shadow of a rod insect within it. It might be a pity for this snake, but it's just a barren thread. It might never be able to revert to its roots and become a barren thread. It's just a strange creature that was formed from the many barren threads that were formed from the barren treasure. This is just my guess. Perhaps the barren thread doesn't even exist. Giving up on this thing in exchange for a higher chance of success in planting the berserker seed is worth it. A glint appeared in Sima Xian's eyes. Once he tapped his chest with his right hand, he quickly moved around the edge of the blood-red picture. As his fingers moved around, chilling air spread out from the skin where his fingers passed. Sima Xian's expression remained the same, cold and aloof. Very soon, the moment his fingers connected with the end of the picture, an undercurrent instantly surged within the blood-red circle on his chest, and eventually, it slowly detached itself from Sima Xian's skin. That blood-red circle was like a piece of skin. As it slowly detached itself, a large amount of sticky threads were revealed between Sima Xian's skin. The sight of those sticky threads was nauseating, but Sima Xian's expression remained the same. Not much change could be seen on his face. As the blood-red circle detached itself from his body, the threads gradually broke apart. Eventually, when the blood-red circle floated before Sima Xian, all the threads broke apart. A strange light appeared in Sima Xian's eyes. He bit the tip of his tongue and coughed out a mouthful of blood. That blood landed on the ground like a piece of skin, and it was quickly absorbed. Before Bai Su does what I want, I must first open up a hole in Su Ming's heart for her. Only then will she have a better chance of succeeding. This snake is the connection between me and Su Ming as I open the hole in his heart. The more you, the hole, and the connection, Su of you will be. Art. Ming. His voice was filled with an indescribable ghastly air. As it spread out in the air, the skin-like red circle before him instantly started burning. As it burned, the rod insect that was faintly discernible within the red circle started trembling furiously, as if it was letting out soundless cries of pain. At the same time, within Han Mountain Bell and Su Ming's cave abode on the 9th summit, the dispirited rod insect's body suddenly twisted. It let out a shrill, pained scream, and as it screamed, the ferocious look in its eyes flickered. The loyalty hidden deep within that ferocious look also became confused. White mist spread out from its body. That white mist did not contain any heat, but as it spread out, the rod insect's body looked as if it was burning. So this is your master. He didn't want you to submit to me. That's why he would rather kill you cruelly. Su Ming's voice echoed within Han Mountain Bell and traveled into the rod insect's heart. The insect possessed an incredibly high level of intelligence. It could understand Su Ming's words. The ferocious look in its eyes dimmed, and the loyalty hidden within also became deeply confused. It was as if no matter how high its intelligence was, it could not understand why its master wanted to kill it. He wanted to kill you because you were captured by me. I don't know how long you've been with Sima Xian, but this must be the first time you've been captured. Even if I let you go, if this happens a second or a third time, and even if I'm not the one who captured you, this will still be the end that awaits you. How could you be so loyal to a master like this? How laughable. But at the same time, I feel sad for you. Su Ming's words were like thunder that rumbled within Han Mountain Bell and fell into the rod insect's heart, causing the ferocious look in its eyes to completely crumble, revealing the loyalty hidden beneath that ferociousness. However, at the same time that loyalty was filled with confusion, there was also grief. Su Ming watched all of this. His expression might have remained as calm as ever, but his heart was shaken. He did not expect that the insect's intelligence would have reached such a level. By the looks of it, it could be said that it was on par with Xiao Hong. However, since Xiao Hong was a fire ape, it was born with intelligence similar to a human's. Yet the insect was able to do so even though it was small, which showed just how extraordinary it was. Your previous master wanted to kill you, and you're still going to be loyal to him? A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Right at the moment, the rod insect's heart was clearly shaken and a large part of its body was burning. Its life force was also rapidly weakening. Su Ming suddenly let out a low growl. Its growl reverberated within Han Mountain Bell. And at the same time, the divine sense Su Ming had gathered around the insect immediately noticed that a gap had appeared in the snake's spiritual resistance. The moment the gap appeared, the stone coins floating around Su Ming's body shuddered at the same time, and all of them shattered into powder that scattered into the air. A large amount of spiritual aura surged out from the shattered stones and surged into the open path in Su Ming's body like a tidal wave. Once it swam through the path rapidly, it gathered at Su Ming's head and released an even stronger divine sense. That divine sense charged into Han Mountain Bell and descended on the insect's body. Then, like a hot knife through butter, it charged straight into the gap in the insect's soul and entered the insect's soul. The instant Su Ming entered the insect's heart, the first thing he noticed with his divine sense was a gigantic red circular picture floating in the indistinct world. The thing looked like human skin. More accurately speaking, it was a piece of human skin with a circular picture drawn on it. It floated in midair, and at that moment, a large amount of it was burning. As it burned, Su Ming could clearly see the shadow of the rod snake shuddering within the red circle, but it did not fight back. Instead, it simply allowed the skin to burn, causing it to become weaker. In just a few short breaths of time, more than half of the human skin had been burnt to ashes. Only a small part of it remained, but from the looks of it, it would probably completely disappear in a few more breaths. When a human skin completely disappeared, the shadow of the rod insect would also disappear, and this strange insect would die completely. See my accent? How ruthless! Su Ming might have expected this to happen, but when he saw it with his own eyes, he still had a taste of Sima Xian's ruthlessness. If he was in Xiaohong's place, and the rod insect was in Xiaohong's place, Su Ming knew that he would definitely not do such a thing. He did not hesitate. The powerful divine sense gathered in the insect's heart rushed towards the burning human skin. At the instant it touched the human skin, Su Ming's heart suddenly trembled. He had a vague feeling that something was off. At that moment, a dark light suddenly flashed on his chest as he sat cross-legged in his cave abode. That dark light came from the mysterious black stone hanging around Su Ming's neck. As that light shone, Su Ming's divine sense in the insect's heart froze. Even if his pet died, this Sima Xian still didn't forget to set me up. I might not know his goal, but it's definitely not something good. The moment Su Ming's divine sense froze, a large amount of the human skin that was left disappeared as it burned. There was not much left. The rod insect's weakness had also reached its peak. It looked as if its soul was about to scatter, but it seemed to have lost its ability to fight back and was quietly waiting for death in the indistinct form. At that moment, there were only two paths before Su Ming. He could either save the rod insect and suffer from Sima Xian's schemes, or he could give up on the insect. He was plotting against Sima Xian, and Sima Xian was also plotting against him. The two of them did not know the other's goal and trump card, but with this rod insect as a medium, they launched a battle that was clearly different from a real battle. Su Ming only hesitated for a moment before he made his decision. His divine sense abruptly ignored Sima Xian's unknown schemes and enveloped the small amount of human skin left. It broke through the burning human skin and rushed into the shadow of the rod insect that was no longer fighting back and seemed to have fallen into despair. Even if Sima Xian wants to use your death to set me up, this is my experiment. Even if you die, you can't die in his hands. The moment Su Ming's divine sense rushed in, the rod insect shuddered. He doesn't want you, but I want you. The mighty voice from Su Ming's divine sense was sent completely into the rod insect's heart. The rod insect's heart instantly trembled, and the shadow in the human skin lifted its head swiftly. There seemed to be a difference in the dull light shining in its eyes. He doesn't want you, but I want you. Those words echoed in the rod insect's heart, causing the different look in its eyes to gradually replace the dull light. Almost without any form of resistance from the rod insect, Su Ming's divine sense left a deep brand in its heart. The moment the brand was left behind, the human skin was completely burned to ashes. However, the moment before the ashes dissipated, the shadow inside seemed to have been erased from the inside. At that moment, the human skin before Sima Exen, who was sitting cross-legged and meditating on the first summit, was completely burnt to ashes. However, his expression changed swiftly, and he stood up as if he was about to rush out of the first summit, but he stopped in his tracks and clenched his fists tightly. His face was incredibly dark, as if there was a monstrous rage contained within it. How could it not be dead? He suddenly understood Su Ming's goal. Su Ming wanted to use him to help him subdue this strange insect. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 249. Su Ming slowly opened his eyes on the ninth summit. There was fatigue in his eyes. Leaving a brand on the insect's soul had always used up his divine sense. Even with the large amount of spiritual aura provided by the stone coins, Su Ming was still incredibly tired due to the burning of Sima Xian's human skin and blood picture. Yet even though he was tired, joy appeared on Su Ming's face. There was a small black rod that was about the thickness of a finger lying quietly on his right hand. If he took a closer look, he would find that it was the strange rod-shaped insect. The snake had its head lowered, and if he did not look closely, it would be difficult to notice that its eyes were also closed. There was a fatigue that was similar to Su Ming's, along with a deep sense of weakness. It was clear that the various things that had happened previously had not only injured this highly intelligent insect physically, but it also caused its soul to go through ups and downs. However, Su Ming could clearly sense that once the snake went through the process of changing masters, it seemed to have become different from before. It was as if its soul had gone through a metamorphosis, and it was spreading outwards. Su Ming could vaguely sense a murderous aura that surged into the sky from its body. When you wake up from your deep sleep, I'll have another trump card by my side. Su Ming mumbled and caressed the rod insect with his left hand. The insect did not move. There was no longer any hint of struggle or resistance from before. After a moment of pensive silence, Su Ming placed the insect back into Han Mountain Bell. It might still be a seal, but the meaning behind it was different from before. Previously, it was to trap the insect, but now it was to protect it. With Han Mountain Bell's strength, he would protect the weakened insect so that it would have enough time to recover until the moment it completely woke up. Once he put away Han Mountain Bell, Su Ming took a deep breath. The sky outside had darkened once again, and before long, it would be completely dark. Su Ming stood up and walked out his cave abode. The moment he walked out, a gust of cold wind blew against his face, causing his hair and robes to flutter. Su Ming could not help but feel slightly refreshed. He breathed in the freezing air, and a chill spread through his body until it covered his entire body. Yet that chill was only on his body. Su Ming's heart was filled with warmth because he was standing on the ninth summit and treated it as his home. When Ziche saw Su Ming walking out not too far away, he immediately stood up and bowed respectfully when he was several dozens of feet away from Su Ming. Ziche greets Uncle Master Su. Su Ming did not speak. He looked at the world in the distance, at the faint light that seemed like a candle flame that was about to be extinguished. He watched as it was gradually devoured by darkness until the world turned dark. There was not a hint of impatience on Ziche's face. He simply stood there respectfully and waited for Su Ming's orders. He had already thought things through. He had to stay in the ninth summit for the next 3 years because he had come to understand the ninth summit. Time trickled by. After a long while, Su Ming looked at the darkness in the distance, and his voice traveled forth faintly as if it had come from the darkness. Bai Su, who is it? Su Ming did not ask about Bai Su's name because he already had it in his heart. Instead, when he fought against Sima Xian using the rod insect as a medium, Su Ming had noticed Sima Xian's scheme, and he had a vague idea about it. Uncle Master, Bai Su is a disciple of Freezing Sky Clan's 7th summit. She rarely speaks to us, so I do not know much about her. But with my understanding of Sima Xian, he would definitely not come into contact with a normal disciple without reason. This girl has ordinary potential, but if Sima Xian came into contact with her, then there must be something special about her status, Ziche said respectfully after a moment of pensive silence. Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he turned around and walked off the platform. Ziche quickly followed behind him. The two of them walked on the 9th summit in the middle of the night. Besides the moaning of the wind, there were no other sound around them. It was a relative silence. Su Ming's footsteps were not quick, but each step he took seemed to follow a certain pattern. Ziche followed behind him, and the more he watched, the more shocked he became. The people in the 9th summit are all monsters. There's something strange about Su Ming's movements now. The longer I watch him, the more I feel as if my mind is being trampled on by his footsteps. Ziche licked his lips, and desire appeared in his eyes. As the two of them continued walking, Ziche's expression suddenly froze, and he turned his head to look at a dark spot not too far away. He seemed to have seen a person floating past from the corner of his eyes just now. That's my second senior brother. Before Ziche could warn him, Su Ming's calm voice traveled into his ears. Ziche was momentarily stunned. Before he could snap out of his daze, his pupils immediately shrank. He could clearly see a strange person floating towards them from the darkness, not too far away. That person suddenly stopped when he floated past them and lowered his body to look around him. Then, he lowered his head and quickly picked up some flowers before he floated to another place. That person was like a ghost, causing all those who saw him to feel terrified. Ziche felt his skin crawl when he saw the person's actions and how he floated around without a sound. It was nighttime, and the area was quiet. The sudden appearance of such a strange person, especially when he learned of that person's identity, made Ziche's heart tremble. What is second Uncle Master doing? Ziche took a deep breath, and his gaze fell on Su Ming, who was walking forward slowly without turning his head back. Ziche quickly caught up to him, and after a moment of hesitation, he spoke in a low voice. He's stealing the plants he planted, Su Ming said calmly. Su Ming spoke calmly, and soon, he arrived at Hu Zi's cave abode. Su Ming had once promised Chen Xiang that he would help persuade Hu Zi. Since he had taken the item Chen Xiang had given him, he would not forget about it. Stealing the plants he planted himself. Ziche's expression was strange, and there was a perplexed look on his face. The 9th summit was becoming more and more difficult to understand. Su Ming did not hear his third senior brother snoring outside Hu Zi's cave abode. When he went to take a look, the cave abode was empty. His third senior brother was nowhere to be seen. Su Ming felt a slight headache coming on. He could already imagine that when night arrived, as long as Hu Zi had nothing else to do, he would definitely go out to scout with that mysterious smile on his face. Right now, he had gone to some mountain and was crouching in some corner, smiling as he peeked at his surroundings. Ziche was behind Su Ming. When he saw that the cave abode was empty, he did not think much of it, but when he saw Su Ming frowning, a thought appeared in his head. He remembered a legend about Hu Zi in Freezing Sky Clan. The moment he remembered this legend, Ziche shuddered, and his expression became even stranger. Su Ming frowned and walked out of the cave abode. He lifted his head and looked at the night sky. After a moment of pensive silence, he walked into the distance. He did not speak along the way, and Ziche did not speak either. The two of them walked quietly for about the time it takes for an incense stick to burn before Su Ming suddenly came to a halt. At the same time, a light chuckle that made Ziche's skin crawl came from not too far away. That chuckle was like the cries of birds in the night. It was incredibly clear in the quiet night. Your grandpa, who is still the smartest. Second senior brother, I'm not going to tell you who stole those plants. It's not good to be too smart. Take your grandpa who, for example. It's lonely, it's too lonely. Accompanying the chuckle that made people's skin crawl was a voice that sounded as if it was filled with emotion. Ziche's mind was blank. He could naturally tell that the voice belonged to Hu Zi, but he could not figure out just what part of Hu Zi was so smart. In his confusion, he instinctively cast a glance at Su Ming. The frown on Su Ming's face disappeared, and in Zi Che's eyes, his tall and straight body bent down. He walked forward with light footsteps, his back hunched. Zi Che's mind was already in a mess. At that moment, Su Ming was like a different person compared to the one he usually saw. That hunched posture made Zi Che gulp, and he could not help but imitate Su Ming. With his back hunched, he walked forward softly. Not long after, a big rock appeared before them. Zi Che saw a man who looked like a tiger crouching behind a rock. He craned his neck and looked over the edge of the rock. Su Ming was already used to Hu Zi's actions. With his back hunched, he moved closer and squatted down beside Hu Zi. Hu Zi turned his head around and cast a glance at Su Ming. He was just about to make a move when Su Ming lifted his right index finger with a wry smile and shushed him. Hu Zi's eyes lit up and his face was full of praise. He said in a low voice, "Not bad, youngest junior brother. Looks like you have the talent to learn from my good habits. I won't be lonely anymore. I'll bring you to every corner of Freezing Sky Clan." Zi Che was also crouching by the side. His curiosity was piqued, and he could not help but lift his head to look at the edge of the rock. The moment he saw it, he blinked and found himself speechless for a long time. Behind the rock was a glacier in the mountain. There was a depression in the middle of it, and it was about 100 feet wide. There was a block of ice that was several dozens of feet tall, standing in it. There was a faint light coming from the ice, and Su Ming could vaguely see the figure of a woman on it. She seemed to be bathing. As the woman bathed, she looked around cautiously. Since only the woman's back could be seen, Su Ming could only see her long hair, but not her face. Besides, it was a little blurry, so it was difficult for Su Ming to see her face. What is this? A dazed look appeared in Zi Che's eyes. He simply could not understand why such an illusion would appear on the 100 feet tall block of ice before him. He even instinctively looked around. The place was quiet, and it was clear that no one was bathing. Haha, this is your grandpa whose greatest creation. It's useless no matter how strict the 7th summit is. I don't have to go there myself, and I can still see what I want to see. Hu Zi looked smug, and he was beaming with joy. Zi Che was stunned, and he instinctively asked, "Uncle Master, since you can see it from here, why don't you go out and look at it from the side of the ice? Why are you crouching here instead?" When Hu Zi heard this, he immediately glared at Zi Che with disdain. "That's why I feel like I'm peeping. Do you understand?" Zi Che smiled wanly. He felt that the blurry figure of the woman's back was a little familiar, but he could not remember where he had seen it. When he looked at it again, the woman reflected on the ice seemed to have turned around a little, and the side of her face was still blurry. But the moment he saw the side of her face, Zi Che suddenly widened his mouth, and veins popped up on his face. I'm seriously asking for recommendation votes. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 250. Sis. The veins on Zi Che's face throbbed. He stood up swiftly and took a step forward. In an instant, he arrived next to the block of ice and threw a punch at it. With a bang, the block of ice instantly shattered into pieces. The shadow on the ice immediately disappeared as the ice shattered. However, the moment before it disappeared, the woman inside seemed to have sensed something and turned her head to look at it. Hu Zi was enraged. He glared at the ice and pounced on it like a tiger. His voice was like a roar. "How dare you destroy the good thing your grandpa, who created with so much effort? I'll kill you." Su Ming had a strange expression on his face. He respected Hu Zi's quirk, but he did not know whether it was just a figment of his imagination. But the moment the ice was shattered by Zi Che, he seemed to have heard two sighs coming from the area around them. "That's my sister. My sister." Zi Che's face was also filled with anger as he roared at the incoming Hu Zi. Hu Zi was originally livid, but when he heard Zi Che's words, he was momentarily stunned. Soon, his imposing manner disappeared, and he came to an abrupt halt. He scratched his head with a slightly embarrassed look on his face, but it soon turned into a nonchalant look. Oh well, I'm a generous man. If it's broken, then so be it. If worst comes to worst, I'll just create another one. Ziche's breathing quickened as he glared at Huzi. More veins popped up on his face. All right. If worst comes to worst, I'll just not look at your sister anymore. Huzi quickly spoke up, feeling a little guilty. Are you serious? Ziche immediately asked. Of course. There's so many people in Freezing Sky Clan. If I say I won't look at her, then I won't. But don't tell your sister, Huzi quickly promised. Ziche's face was dark. When he saw Huzi's expression and the guilty look on his face, he could not help but smile wryly, but cold sweat broke out on his body. He instinctively looked at Su Ming. There was a strange look on Su Ming's face. He did not bother with Ziche and Huzi. Instead, he walked around the area as if he was looking for something. His strange actions immediately attracted Huzi and Ziche's attention. The two of them also looked around. Youngest junior brother, what are you looking for? Excitement appeared on Huzi's face. He quickly approached Su Ming with light steps and asked in a low voice. As he spoke, he kept sizing up Su Ming. Su Ming's footsteps faltered and his gaze fell on a glacier before him. After a long while, he shook his head and looked at Huzi. Third senior brother, can you stop going to see Minister Chun? Once Huzi heard it, he immediately nodded, but soon a look of understanding appeared on his face, and he gave Su Ming a mysterious smile. When he saw Huzi smile, Su Ming was about to speak. I understand. Ha, youngest junior brother, you don't have to explain anymore. There's nothing your third senior brother doesn't understand. Your third senior brother is the smartest person in the entire Ninth Summit. Su Ming could only smile wryly. He knew that he would not be able to explain himself. That was why he chose not to. Instead, he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards Huzi. There's no need to be so polite. We're from the same sect. Right, junior brother, third brother's intrusive dreams is powerful, isn't it? It sent Suma Xin running away, didn't it? Junior brother, don't worry. I haven't mastered intrusive dreams yet. Once I master it, it'll be even more powerful. As he spoke, he suddenly lifted his head and looked at the sky. Youngest junior brother, I won't talk to you anymore. It's almost time. I have to rush to the 8th summit as soon as possible. By the way, do you want to come with me? Huzi looked at Su Ming. When he saw Su Ming shaking his head, he quickly flew up and turned into a long arc that charged into the darkness in the distance. Soon, he disappeared without a trace. But no matter how Su Ming looked at his departing figure, he looked rather pathetic. It was especially so when he saw Ziche's forbearing expression. He understood that his third senior brother was clearly feeling a little awkward and guilty after being caught red-handed. That was why he left in a hurry. This won't happen again, or else. It doesn't matter whether he's right or wrong. If you do this again, then I still lack a material for making medicine. Su Ming turned around and looked at Ziche coldly. Ziche's heart trembled. He felt a little wronged, but when he saw the cold look in Su Ming's eyes, he lowered his head and obeyed. The ice was blurry. I couldn't see anything. Besides, my senior brother also said that he won't look at your sister anymore. Let's just forget about it. As Su Ming spoke, he walked into the distance. Ziche let out a sigh of relief in his heart. He was not an unreasonable person. Su Ming might have said those words, but he did not do anything to him because of what happened just now. He only warned him not to do it again. This in itself was already a form of respect for him. Once Su Ming and Ziche left, a person suddenly flew towards the place filled with shattered eyes from a distance. That person approached cautiously and stood on the spot, looking around furtively before quickly crouching down and sweeping away all the ice. He bent his back and left quickly. That tall and sturdy figure was clearly Huzi. How unlucky. This is the first time I made something, and I was enjoying myself watching it. I didn't expect to run into her little brother. How could I have forgotten about this? Oh well, I'll have to be more careful next time. Huzi mumbled and quickly left. After a moment after Huzi left, the glacier that Su Ming had been staring at previously started distorting, and a handsome person gradually walked out from within. There was a slightly awkward look on his face, but even so, he still looked as gentle as a spring breeze. That person was naturally second senior brother. Once he appeared, he let out a few fake coughs. Youngest junior brother almost saw through me. It's all my fault for making such a good thing. Second senior brother mumbled and quickly left. Once second senior brother left, another moment passed before distorted ripples appeared in the air around the area of 100-something feet. An old man dressed in a flowery long robe walked out from within. The old man took a quick step forward and patted his robes in a relaxed manner. He placed his hands behind his back and calmly walked towards the top of the mountain. His expression looked as calm as ever, but there was a smug look in his eyes. Third is pretty good. He made such a good thing. It's a pity that it was broken. But with his personality, he'll definitely make another one in a few days, and he'll even strengthen it so that no one can break it with just one punch. It's a pity. But isn't fourth too observant? He almost noticed that second was by his side. But they're still too naive if they want to see through my presence. The old man mumbled and walked forward proudly. He was Tion Siezi, the one dressed in flowery robes, Tion Siezi. Time passed peacefully. Azu Z created and peeped. Second elder brother planted grass during the day and stole flowers at night. Occasionally, he would accidentally run into Huzi looking at the ice he was making. Time passed slowly. Of course, Tion Siezi would occasionally appear at night, dressed in flowery robes. Very soon, 2 months passed by. During these 2 months, the battle between Su Ming and Si Ma Xian in Freezing Sky Clan was spread among the people who had been watching that day. Gradually, almost all the disciples in the 8 summits knew that a person who could fight against Si Ma Xian had appeared in the 9th summit. They also knew that this person was a divine general of transcendence. His name spread rapidly, and gradually, due to his battle against Si Ma Xian, his name appeared on the great frozen plains of Freezing Sky Clan's ranking board. He was ranked 9th on the Great Frozen Plains, replacing Ziche. He was ranked 9th because the battle between Su Ming and Si Ma Xian had not ended. The people might have some understanding towards Su Ming's strength, but they did not know the specifics. From his battle against Si Ma Xian, they could tell that Si Ma Xian was clearly stronger than Su Ming. It was especially so when the two of them did not manage to complete the final style. This was something that many people regretted. During these 2 months, besides Su Ming's name spreading through Freezing Sky Clan, there was also another big event that was being prepared in full swing. There were only 10 months left before the Sky Mist Shaman Hunt that was held once every 10 years. Sky Mist Shaman Hunt was a regular event in Freezing Sky Clan. It was held once every 10 years, and each time, the disciples sent out would range from thousands to tens of thousands. Western Sea Clan, which was another big tribe in the land of South Morning, would also send out disciples to fight against the shamans together with Freezing Sky Clan. At that time, when Sky Mist Shaman Hunt began, the disciples from the 2 clans would be on Sky Mist Barrier to intimidate the shamans. They would also prevent a certain number of people from walking out of Sky Mist Barrier and entering the territory of the shamans. Each Sky Mist Shaman Hunt lasted for a year. For all the disciples who participated in this battle, this year was a bloody trial and tempering. Whether their treasured swords were broken or if they were sharp, this year would be able to tell. However, not every single Sky Mist Shaman Hunt would be held during Sky Mist Shaman Hunt. Since ancient times, there have been many shaman hunts, but only about a dozen of them have been incredibly devastating. The rest of the time, most of them were rather peaceful. However, this time was different from the previous ones. The Sky Mist Shaman Hunt that would be held 10 months later was a battle that only happened once every 100 years. Sky Mist Shaman Hunt was held once every 10 years. This was a small battle, and the scale of the battle that would happen once every 100 years would be much larger. This was a rule set a long time ago by the 2 big tribes in the land of South Morning. The reason why the shaman hunt was held so frequently and had to be sent out on a large scale every 100 years was so that they could understand the speed at which the shamans outside Sky Mist were developing. Whether there were any outstanding shamans appearing, whether there were any new shamans, whether there were more shamans, These were the main points of the battle that would happen once every 10 years. There were a lot of disciples who had joined Sky Mist Shaman Hunt multiple times within Freezing Sky Clan, but there were also some who had never joined before. However, in general, most of the disciples were already familiar with this. During these 10 months, all those who knew that they would join the battle would isolate themselves and make their preparations. During the 2 months of peace in the Ninth Summit, there were a few things that were not peaceful. Ziche's sister had charged into the mountain multiple times and targeted Hu Zi. At that moment, Su Ming was sitting cross-legged on the platform outside his cave abode. The sky was clear. As he sat there, he placed his right hand on the drawing board before him and drew again and again. His movements were very slow, but there was a sense of ancientness that seemed to emanate from his fingers as he drew the line. He was copying. For the past 2 months, he had been copying Sima Xian's sword slash, wanting to find that feeling he had felt in the past. Ziche watched by his side, with an intoxicated look on his face, as if he wanted to find his own epiphany from those strokes. Yet at that moment, "Sundahu, get your ass out here." A woman's cold voice traveled forth from beyond the Ninth Summit. "You stupid B*TCH. Why are you only staring at me? Your little brother saw it, and so did my youngest junior brother." Hu Zi's muffled voice traveled forth, as if he was about to cry. He sounded incredibly wronged. Ziche was instantly embarrassed. Su Ming lifted his head and smiled wryly. "I hope you can recommend it again. I hope it can surpass 5,000. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.